Hey everybody, Royal Alliance UK, Matt and Ash, and we're just waiting on Ryan before we get started. Hope you're all well, hope you've had a good weekend. We have. We've had a terrific weekend. If you haven't seen what's happened with us and our 1,000 subscribers and the celebration show we did yesterday, and that was an amazing little self-indulgent thing that we've never done before.
Yeah, it was, and it was nice in a little bit of way because we never do anything like that. But as we said, the hardest part of doing a podcast is the start because it's just so much work you're putting for absolutely no reward whatsoever. You've just got to keep grinding and grinding and grinding and keep putting out good stuff until you get to a point where people want to start listening to you, and then even when they do, you've got to work even harder to keep them with you. So just to get to a stage like this was just like, you know what? Just going to be nice for one evening to just indulge a little, just enjoy some of the milestones we're reaching before cracking back on with all the stuff again. And I have been because I've spent all day working on pod stuff, so the grind never stops, as it were. But we had that one nice night, which was cool.
It was. Ash, how was your weekend?
Pretty good, pretty good. Mostly was spent at work, but obviously enjoyed the Villa win that got Potter sacked. And then watching you guys yesterday when I was in the gym celebrating. It's a beautiful moment because you guys have deserved it. As I said yesterday, you guys have put the hard work in for like 3 years now, and it's finally coming to bear fruits. And it's just cool to come along, like sort of jump on the boat halfway through and sort of help paddle a bit.
Well, the thing is, this has never been about the OGs just carrying it all the way through. I mean, Ryan joined us a year into it or so. We obviously had Aaron, who kicks it all off at the beginning and gave us a really good base to continue things on from. And, you know, Martin and Ryan Farden were there at the start, and for most of the shows through that first year were there. And then they've kind of taken a step back because of other commitments. And, you know, so this is a fluid thing. And, you know, before it's all said and done, other people will probably come and go. It will just be a part of the evolution of what we're doing. So I wouldn't be even mentioning the fact that you've come on when you've come on. You know, the stuff that you put on for the blog and how regular that was and how in-depth it was, and the stuff that your college knowledge is just so much better than the average of our pod members, which I would try and put myself in firmly in average, and your knowledge is just far beyond that. So it's great to have you on just for that element alone, never mind the NFL stuff. Your memory is exceptional, and I wish I had that. So the guys in the chat, hello, thank you for coming in. Cool Down Rat taking the piss out of me for forgetting the microphones were on when we started yesterday. Thank you for that. Patman70 saying howdy fellas, and then Dan McGuinness, Dan saying let's get this mofo to 10k. How you doing, lads? Congrats again. Brent says beautiful day in Twin Lake, Michigan. Congrats on the 1,000 and Vash Starwin. Great job, guys. Cheers. Congrats on 1k. I can't believe we've got there. Like, even, I know it isn't really much of a thing getting someone to click subscribe 1,000 times because it takes a second to do. But trying to convince someone to do it, like, how many people actually subscribe to anything? When I'm flicking through Instagram Reels or Facebook Stories or TikTok or whatever, I almost never subscribe to anyone anymore. I'm just kind of flicking through, and YouTube videos come on and I'll just browse one or whatever. I very rarely click subscribe myself, and then you forget like what a big deal it is for those people actually making stuff. So, you know, we just really appreciate you guys. And Austin Damon coming and saying congrats on your 1k. Thanks, man. It's been a grind, like Ant said, but it's just been all worth it to get here, and hopefully onwards and upwards. I mean, we got the last 100 in like a week after doing this for the YouTube's been on for 2 years. And we've got 1/10 of our subscribers in the last 5 days. It's nuts. How you doing, Ryan?
Well, the job hunt is shit.
Oh, that's not good.
Lots of applications so far, it's just rejection. They don't want experience. It's a lie. I've got lots of experience, but they don't want me. So
that sucks,
it's
man.
It's a labour.
Have you had your internal interview redone yet?
No, I don't even know what's happening to that job. The vacancy's gone.
Oh, what?
Well, they've taken it down, so I don't actually know what's happening.
Who have you done today, Ryan? I know you've got Malik, but I didn't see anyone else.
I took the Tim Demorat as well from Fordham.
From Fordham. You like your... That Fordham must be FCS, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You and your FCS fascination.
Yeah, he's not too bad, actually. He's better than Cunningham.
I don't think that's going to take a lot, really. I mean, maybe I'm doing Cunningham a disservice, but his Senior Bowl was not good, as far as I can remember, anyway. Robert
21 was
360.
better than 22. I was going to say Cunningham's 21 was better than 22. That's all I'm going to say. He had a bit of a down year.
Reminds me of a lot of people that we're about to talk about,
Sure.
potentially. Robert 360 says, congrats on 1K. Appreciate you, man. Thank you. Austin says, do you think it because the team is doing better, so more people are running in? I think that we got to 1K so quickly because of two things. We had the giveaway running, which has helped us get a few subscribers in a sort of cheap fashion. Just acknowledging the fact. Dave Burkett has consistently broken our records when he's come on. His name is just a massive pull. That video that we did 2 days ago now has 2,400 views. But our nearest video to that has 970. So, like, most of our videos have, like, 50% subscribed, 50% unsubscribed. Whereas that video is 75% unsubscribed, 25% subscribed. So it's like we've appealed to a much wider base of people who've never seen us before because of that one video. So it's one of those things. And also, you know, we can't convert these guys if, when they see us for the first time, they don't believe that we know what we're talking about. So it's a testament to our grind in the first place, but also this is why you get guests on shows, because it attracts people who wouldn't normally watch you. And then maybe there's a little happy element of Lions fans feeling good about themselves and clicking subscribe as a thing. But I don't see whether that's a thing or not. Michael Lucci says, what quarterback at what pick that's somewhat possible would have each of you very excited? Mike, I'm going to put that in for the end of the show because obviously it is about what we're talking about today as opposed to just a general question. So that's a good one to finish on, I think. We need a name for the show. Because you know I'm not good at this. So if you guys in the chat have anything, that would be great. If not, you guys live here with me, if you've got any ideas about some sort of quarterback pun that makes me sound like a twonk, then feel free.
No, nothing.
No. There's lots of like quarterbacks that have like punnable names, but I don't want to go there.
Yes, I guess you're thinking about a quarterback 6 on the board if you're saying that.
Yeah. I don't know. Hall monitor, no.
No.
Give me a hooker, no.
No. Duggan down for the draft.
Oh. No. Forever Young.
Like what?
Anyone?
You don't need a title for it.
No, I know, but I like having it. We've never not had a title before. James Natraba says, I never subscribe except for my Lions. Thanks for the great work. I'm starting to hope the Lions trade down and take Cansey and Bijan. Thoughts? If we trade down, Bijan won't be there. That's my fear, and I don't want Cansey. I think he'll bust. That's my thoughts on him. Cansey's like the most favoured Lions pick in the fan base as far as I can see, and I just couldn't be more out on him at the moment.
If we take Cansey, Well, that'll be my stream over. I'll just log off in a huff and go to bed. I don't like him. Don't want him. Don't trust him. Little dwarf.
I'm going to go with Michael Lucci's suggestion. It's a sifting through for QB2.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's all right. I can run with that. Cool Down Rat says pass the buck. And that's exactly what I've done with trying to find the the episode title. QB or not to QB?
Oh,
That's actually
I like that
quite
one.
good.
I like that one.
Say it again.
Willie Levis and the Mayonnaise Factory.
I like that.
Oh, Will Levis, the Invisible Man, because he's so fucking pasty.
Right, that is the name of the show. I'm sorry, Mike. You had it for a matter of moments. All right, fellas, are you ready to go? In fact, there hasn't been any extra news today, has there? It's just been Marvin Jones signing, and that's it.
The new athletic trainer that was. But
I'll just get to the quarterbacks.
oh,
I know that we go deep normally, but what are we going to say? The guy came on for a year. We didn't get very many injuries this coming year. It's a bit weird we've replaced him. I don't know. Right.
yeah.
Giovanni Lyons says, you UK fans equals yuck Lions fans, lol, joking. Okay. Bob Orland says, thoughts on the two QBs that played in the college football championship game. We are going to talk Max Duggan, and we will obviously talk Stetson Bennett as well, so don't worry about that. Gio says, love you guys. Love you too. And Miss Harley Quinn's in the chat as well, saying, Gio, I love them too. Right, let's get on with this one. Here we go.
Recording in progress.
Welcome to another edition of the Royal Alliance UK podcast, episode 186, Willie Levis and the Mayonnaise Factory. My name's Matthew Turner, alongside Ryan McCluskey, Anthony Fitzpatrick, and Ashley Soden. How are you doing, boys?
Good.
Doing good.
Saved my least favourite group to the last.
We are doing the 2023 NFL draft position look at course of backs today, our final look at draft positions before we move on to mock drafting for the remainder of April, before the draft in just over 3 weeks' time. A bit of preamble to start with. Don't forget to join our Discord channel. I'll put an invite link in the live chats in YouTube and Twitch. It's grown substantially actually in the last few weeks, and with the draft coming along, there's no better time than to join us right now with some good Lions chat. College Football Podcast, Ant and Ryan, is, I think, tomorrow now. What have you got for us?
Yeah, we've had a couple of weeks off. We are going to be back tomorrow. We had a request from a listener. I got a WhatsApp message a few weeks ago asking if we'd ever done anything in regards to Dynasty Fantasy Football before, which I said, no, I don't have a clue, but I thought it might be quite an interesting thing for us to do as we were going for the draft. So what me and Ryan are doing is we're compiling lists of the rookies who are about to hit the draft and ranking them from a Dynasty Fantasy Football perspective. And it's very hard because it's not just like saying the best guy straight away. You got to try and think what scheme a guy's going to go in, whether long-term he's going to be better than a guy now. And it's actually quite an interesting thing. So we will be giving our Dynasty Fantasy Football rankings for any of those who are looking at the upcoming draft, because the draft happens for fantasy before it does in the actual real world. So you've kind of got to guess a lot of it. So it's going to be fun. We're going to be doing fantasy football.
All right, please don't forget to like the episode and sub to the podcast and give us a rating on your podcast provider. We did get a 5-star recently. I was very proud of that one. We haven't had that many, so if you are on Apple Podcasts and you can do that, that would mean the world to us. And don't forget to download the app at lionsnationunited.com, Herman Moore's project to bring the best in Lions content creators together. We're also a Twitch affiliate, and that means if you have an Amazon Prime subscription, you get a free sub to use every single month. Just go on to twitch.tv and you can give your favourite Twitch streamer $2.50 with that sub, so make sure you give it away if you've got one. There's also a feedback form down below on the YouTube, so you can click the form there and give us some feedback about what we do well, what you like, what you don't like. We're always looking to make the show better, and there is a tip jar down there too. Also, there is our 900 sub giveaway still running. It runs until the end of Friday UK time, so that is 7 p.m. Eastern time in the States. It's free to enter, and if you win a choice of one of Ryan McCluskey's lovely merch. And then once that's completed, we have now reached our 1,000 sub milestone. If you didn't listen to our celebratory podcast yesterday live, or we've got it on the audio pod as well, it was a lovely, gratuitous, self-indulgent little thing that me and Ant did just to celebrate you guys, really, because, you know, you've pushed us over the top on YouTube. It means that we potentially can get monetized now. It's the next evolution of the show, and it's been a great thing. But what we did promise is to do another giveaway. I know that Ryan's thinking on what exactly to put in that, although the Swift helmet's still up for grabs. Yes, Ryan, that's going in?
Yeah, it's a full-size Swift Eclipse black helmet.
So,
I think I've got a stitched signed Reggie Bush jersey as well. There's some other stuff. Whoever wins, I will just send them some photos.
There we go.
And they can pick.
Yeah, there we go. So some really good stuff in there. Just to make sure to enter this one, then enter the next one. It's absolutely free for you guys, so why not? Let's kick off with the only bit of notable news, Ash, which is that the wide receiver Marvin Jones Jr. is back. He re-signs with the Detroit Lions on a 1-year, $3 million deal, which is worth up to $5 million with incentives. The receiver, guys, was beloved while he was here as someone who maybe didn't get the limelight as much as Kenny Golladay whilst they were both here. Formed a terrifying trio between them and Golden Tate. Some of the best wide receiver trios we've had in the last 30 years, potentially, even including some of the greats that we've had. And, you know, very fond memories of him perhaps not being the most athletic guy or the tallest guy, but somehow just finding a way to win on that outside. And actually, personally, I can't think of a better guy to have for JMO to learn from, because you know that Goff can throw that timing route to the outside, and Jones pulled off that catch better than anyone. Like, this as a cheap deal for a really good piece that's going to fit right in with the culture. You know, coming in at wide receiver 4 or 5, it might see the end of one of the guys at wide receiver 6 or 7 now not going to have a chance to get in because he's probably making the roster. But it feels good to have someone back, doesn't it?
Yeah, wow, I'll go first. And 100%, you say culture fit, great. It seems we're rewarding the guys who are great culture fits in the pass regime, and now coming back to sort of get their rewards for it. Brought back Graham. Now we've got Marvin, who will, as you say, is the perfect guy for James to learn from. Bit more nuance with some of the route running, especially deep, and the contested catch stuff, which is something that JMO might need to learn from. And it's just a perfect guy. We can depend on him as a 4-5. If he needs to step up for a game or two as a receiver 3, especially if it's against the Vikings, as he always seems to love playing against the Vikings, just bring him up, get him 10, 20 snaps a game. If at a push, get him a couple of routes, and he's perfect as a sort of guy there just to be a solidifying block.
Yeah, it's in effect, it's a good deal for us. I think, you know, when he left, I was fine with that because it was too much money. Now he's coming back a few years later, and it's the right sort of money. Well, it's only $3 million becoming 5 or something like that, isn't it? So I don't mind paying him that much money. He'll come in. He'll be a good mentor for the young guys. He might get 400 or 500 yards himself. It's depth. It's what you need. So, yeah, it's a good deal for the Lions. It's good to have him back. And, you know, he'll give his all for the team here. And as I say, he'll be a great influence on all those young guys around him. So, yeah, I'm happy he's back.
Yeah, he's a dependable guy. He might get, 40, 50 targets. He'll share them with Raymond. I trust him a lot more than I do Josh Reynolds. Fine, wide receiver 4. Like I say, if he gives me 450 to 550 yards, he's served his purpose. Like I say, he's no spring chicken now, so he's thinking about where he wants to be and where he enjoys his time being. So, yeah, he knows what his role will be. He'll be a part-time guy and a guy that can take a shot down the field. So there's still some life in the old legs. And he's liked as well. So if this is the last place he goes before he retires, then it would kind of make sense if you're thinking about life after football.
Absolutely, it does. Right, we did change our athletics trainer, as Ash rightly pointed out before we started the show. I am not going to count that as something particularly notable at this point. It's hard for us to really read in too much into what happened, so I'm going to get straight on with the quarterbacks that we've been looking at today. And I'm going to preface this by saying that we have not studied in detail CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. And the main reason for that is that it seems terrifically likely that we will not be in a position to draft either of those two quarterbacks in particular. We'll mention them in passing at the end of the show just to do belt and braces to cover all the bases, but they are not going to be a feature of this. We've looked at quarterbacks potentially that we could take at, well, I've looked at Richardson, so I'm going to say that that's someone that we could take at 6, but the majority of picks that we're looking at are backup quarterbacks or someone we could take at 18. So, day 3 guys, maybe fringe day 2 guys. That's our focus today. We will mention some of the higher up quarterbacks in passing later on. And without further ado, Ash, why don't you kick us off with one of the quarterbacks of your choice?
So let's start with a Discord favourite, especially of our good friend Yehor Jesus and Discord, who always loves to mock this guy to us. Unfortunately, it's also from a college that early on Discord, Ant says never had a good QB this millennium so far in the NFL. So hopefully this guy can change it. Of course, talking about Jaron Hall, the BYU quarterback. So this year he's had a 86.3 offensive grade with an 82.4 passing and 72 run grade. He's completed 248 of his 376 passes for 3,171 yards, 31 touchdowns, and 6 passing touchdowns. He also ran 86 times, though, obviously, little preface that in college, sack numbers are included with the rushing stats rather than passing. So this obviously, all the rushing stats will include the sack numbers. So it's 86 rushing attempts for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also caught 2 passes for 28 yards and 1 touchdown this season. So he has a RAS of 7.95, with his size being very poor, with being literally a shade over 6 foot, 207 pounds, and 9.5 inch hands. His agility is great, with a 4.19 shuttle and a 7.06 free cone, and an elite speed with a 4.64 40-yard dash with 1.59 10-yard. So I watched 2 games. I watched Oregon and Liberty from this year. Oregon was a middling game with a 68.5 offensive grade, while Liberty was 58.1. So you sort of get the good of him and the bad. So the strengths comes from a family of athletes. His brothers, his mum, and his dad all did sports for NYU. For example, his mum was a gymnast, I believe, and I think his dad was a wrestler. And that wrestling background comes in because he's very tough. He will stand there in the face of pressure and will try and deliver a ball, even if it means he'll take a hit. He's very much got that sort of like Stafford mold to use someone we know, and obviously the guy I'm wearing to compare him to. But he does have a good feel for pressure. He will judge whether the throw is on or if he needs to get out the pocket and then make that decision well. And he has good mechanics for both quick reads and deeper dropbacks. And partly because of his baseball background, he has the ability to make velocity on the balls, even when off platforms. He can make almost any throw you ask him to make. For example, one of the hardest throws I've seen him make was against Liberty, where he was on the far hash mark and he dropped it into the bread basket on the sideline on the opposite side for our good friend Puka. And not only is he good as in the passing game, he is a very good runner. He can be used on read options or design draws, and was used on both of those for good results in the games I saw. And he can definitely move the coverage against man coverage, can move the sticks as well. And on QB sneak plays, he can also generate the push even without the fabled Eagles sneak play. And because you know what I'm like, I look at the minute stuff. He has a very, very good fake handoff for play action and play fakes. However, he does have some weaknesses. So, as we've mentioned with the Raz, his frame is not exactly ideal. He's a tiny bit short and he's very slight in his frame. And he's old. He's already 25. So, it's not really going to be someone you invest in for the future, perhaps, because he's almost had all the development you could probably ask for him. He's sort of hit his ceiling. And despite being very tough, he's not very durable. He's had 2 concussions in 2019, a season-ending hip injury in 2020, a degrading rib injury that ruled him out for 2 games, and a lower leg injury in 2021, and then he had an ankle injury in 2022. So his frame, unlike, for example, Bryce Young, who has a similar issue, sort of knock against him, he's not able to take the hits even though he sort of takes them. And he's not very consistent as a passer. He has to really get hot or have his first read always be open for him to be able to throw with rhythm. And he can rush on delivering the ball on some of those reads, which leads to inaccuracy as he sort of just tries to whip it in there rather than actually make a good decision. And despite what I say, where he can usually read pressure, when he doesn't, he usually opts to throw it into double coverage rather than throw the ball away to live another down, which can lead to some turnover worthy plays. And that definitely shows us, despite having good luck against the turnovers, a lot of his balls can get batted up by defenders, and the defense just doesn't come down with them. So it's sort of risk reward. So as for the sort of NFL comparison, Riz in his article recently, where he was looking at QBs in every round, compared him to a healthier, smaller Hendon Hooker. But for me, right now, he is a smaller Sam Darnold. He has all the tools, but hasn't fully put it together yet. He still has a few more steps of like making the IKEA flat pack case of being a quarterback to go, despite having a longer time to go on it. So Darnold is also 25. But if he can just learn to get through his progressions a bit, slow down, just learn how to get into rhythm, he could have the potential to become a sort of Bridgewater level backup QB who could make his money as a high level backup and maybe have string together a couple of starts in place of injury rather than just 1 or 2. So in summary, he is currently the 7th QB on the consensus board at 149 overall. So he's on there. He's about a 5th round prospect, but in some mocks he's been going as high as the late 2nd, supposedly. For me, that's too rich in the late 2nd. But if he's there at 152 when we pick, I'd run it in completely. There, he'll be a very, very good backup. He has the mobility as well. So when we face Fields twice a year, or we face, if Lamar stays in battle Baltimore, we face him later. He has the mobility for us to be able to practice against that and get some actual reps against that, rather than have the issues we did last year. He definitely could run the sort of offense, but he also gives you a floor with the rushing ability that Goff currently doesn't have. But the size and the durability concerns will probably hold him back from ever getting a consistent starting role, because you don't know if you can trust him to sort of last the amount of games you need to for a starter.
Thoughts on Jaron Hall, boys?
I think he fits the role of a backup fairly well. Like I say, does the basics right. If you ignore a checkered injury past, he offers more on the mobility side of ground feeling pressure than Jared does. He's able to, I suppose, do I trust him on a redraw. He would understand where a defender is crashing down and pull the ball and take off when needs be, where we don't currently have that. He can make most of the throws in the book. He has had good receivers like the Romney brothers, Puka and Asua, so he's able to move the ball down the field and take deep shots where need be. So if you're looking for someone on day 2 that is a little bit older, a little bit more experienced, and you want to mold into that future number 2 that as of now we don't have, I'd throw 3rd rounder at him. I feel like Brad Holmes would be interested. I feel like BYU's offense has never been that pass heavy. Maybe he's been a little underutilized in the last few years. It's been a pretty strong run game, and they've had pretty good offensive linemen the last few years, but it feels like he's never been asked to really explode as a passer. Maybe he's not been used to the full potential. So I feel like he's a very solid option. It's kind of, I think the class it wears a bit thin on day 2. You're really kind of like, some of them are like really iffy on. I'm probably more sound on him than I am some of the other guys that are potential backups.
I mean, if he'd not have had injuries in his career, I think there could have been a future as a quarterback 1 there for him. He kind of has everything you need: the strength, the toughness. He's got the arm. He's got all the ability in the world when he wants to. But 1, he's not really been in a system that utilizes it that much. Again, BYU really quite pass heavy. Did a lot better last year. They gave him a few more looks and did really well, but the injuries are just really concerning. And you've got to take into account the fact that he is 25 right now. So he is on the older side of the spectrum as well. And, you know, in terms of starters, it's going to take a while to develop him. So it's going to be very late on in the process when you start seeing the benefits from it, which will drive the value down even further. So if you can say, you know, quality backup within a couple of years, maybe something like that, then that's great. But you don't really spend big picks on that. He's going to be 27 by then. So I think someone will take a chance on him. I think someone will think. I think it might be like a Davis Mills type thing. So, you know, difficult, but someone will go. There is the potential to have a quarterback one in there, like there is with Davis, and someone's tried. And I think someone might try again with Jaron Hall. I just don't think it will be us. We're not in the position to be spending a high pick on a 25-year-old like that who's got those injury histories. So, but as a quarterback, I really like him, and I love his receiver as well. So yeah, I'm interested to see what happens with him and who pulls the trigger, because I think someone just might.
I really like him. There's just something in his arsenal that I really enjoy watching. He throws a very pretty ball when it's on the money, especially going across the hash marks. Ash, you mentioned one particular example, but there's consistent ones on tape of him going from opposite hash mark to sideline on like a quick 5-yard out route where he can just drop it in. He can hit a bullet pass if there's no corner in the way, and if there is a corner in the way, he can drop it right where it needs to be as a little kind of floating pass, and it's just beautiful to watch. But sometimes he just has bad misses that he just shouldn't be having, and I don't think it's necessarily bad accuracy. There's something in that BYU offense that just wasn't quite right, and it was quarterback and receiver not being on the same page. Is that quarterback or is that receiver problems? I don't know, but there's multiple examples of Jaron Hall throwing a slant route when the receiver's done a hitch and vice versa. And it's like, on some level, you want your quarterback to be sorting that out. Whether it's the receiver's fault or his fault, he's got to kind of take charge of the situation. And I kind of question whether, therefore, he has a sort of leadership qualities that you'd hope for in a bit of an older prospect. So that's something that gives me pause. But if you have a look at the guys that are kind of in and around his draft position, I think he gives you the best chance to win in relief as a quarterback too. So if you can pick him up early day 3, I'm on board. But like 81's just a bit rich. You'd kind of hope to get some sort of rotational piece or even a starter at 81. And so taking QB2 there just kind of feels a bit redundant to me. I don't like it when there's so many of these guys we could take on day 3, as we're going to kind of go through in a little bit. So that's Jaron Hall for me. Love him as a prospect, but he's not for me. All right. And why don't you take the next one?
Okay, just give me a tick. So I am going to start with one of my favorite prospects in this draft. I've mentioned him a lot, but I've not really talked in too much detail. So, of course, I'm going to talk about Lindsey Scott Jr., the quarterback from the Incarnate Ward Cardinals. He is 24 years old. He is 5'10", 228 pounds, and he can run a 4.5 40-yard dash. So the guy is rapid. Now, as many people will not have heard of him, because he is right down there in the terms of draft diamonds, I'm going to go through his college career a little first and then talk a little bit about the player. So he actually has a 7-year story in college football. Started out a long time ago, but still relatively young for a 7-year guy. So he started life at LSU in the SEC. He was the scout team quarterback there as a freshman. Before he transferred down to JUCO, which is Division 3 of college football, right at the very bottom, in search of a starting opportunity. He ended up at East Mississippi Community College, and in his 1 year there, he actually won the JUCO championship as a starter with a season average 156.8 QBR rating. The opposing quarterback that day was one Bryce Perkins, who is backing up for the LA Rams at this point in time. On the back of that season, transferred back up to the SEC for a second time, this time with Missouri, hoping to try and win a starting spot off the back of that really good year. But once again, ended up as scout team quarterback. He was stuck behind Drew Lock in the pecking order. Obviously, Drew Lock, second round pick a few years back. So I guess no shame in being beaten out there. So he spent a year there. Then he transferred for a third time, but this time he stayed in Division 1, but he dropped down to the FCS with Nichols State. He had to sit a year to comply with transfer portal rules, because back then you had to sit a year when you transfer between Division 1 schools. And then he was hit with the COVID shortened year before things finally started to take off for him. So in 18 games with Nichols State, he had 5,314 passing yards, 49 touchdowns, 18 interceptions, quarterback rating of 141.5. On the back of those 2 good years, he then used his extra year of eligibility he got because of COVID to transfer one final time to the bigger stage in the FCS of Incarnate Word, where he has been playing this year, and who had just lost their star quarterback Cameron Ward to Washington State. That's a quarterback you will hear a lot about on the college show next year. And he proceeded to have one of the most productive quarterback seasons ever. So he threw for 4,657 passing yards this season, 68 touchdowns, which broke the previous FCS record by 10. It was 58 before that. And he threw just 8 interceptions. Then you add another 777 yards and 11 touchdowns on the ground as Incarnate Word made the FCS playoff semifinals for the first time ever. And just to top it all off, he was also awarded the Walter Payton Award for Best Offensive Player in the entire FCS as well. So a great season for him. In terms of the player himself, Ward is a true dual threat quarterback. As I said, he possesses 4.5 speed. It shows on tape. He has the athletic ability to go with it, to make defenders miss him in open field. Once he hits green grass, it is very hard to stop him. He forced 41 missed tackles on just 90 carries last season as a quarterback. And in his last 3 years, when he's been starting for Nichols State and Incarnate Word, over half of his 2,420 rushing yards have come after contact. So this is a guy, he may be a little smaller, but he is bulky. He can play through tackles, and he can keep on going to make that yardage. So the run game, really good with him. As a passer, he has improved markedly year upon year. So 3 years ago, he was throwing at about 58% completion for his passes. This past year, that's gone all the way up to 70%. Turnover-worthy play rate is just 3.2%, which would have ranked him 15th in the NFL last year. So kind of given the size concerns and the concerns about guys who like to run the ball a lot, throwing on the run, as a lot of mobile guys like to do, he's very good at not putting the ball in harm's way that often. And speaking of another issue with the height, just 5 batted passes in his 3 years as a starter. So again, when the quarterback's smaller, it's easier to knock his passes down. But with Lindsay, really good positioning with the football, not putting it in harm's way, doesn't get the batted passes down, which sometimes you see against some of these smaller quarterbacks. In terms of the arm, he's got the arm strength to hit all 3 levels of the field. Against Nevada, it was a really good game where they upset FBS Nevada this season, even though they weren't really that good. But there's sort of a play where he drops down to the right side of the pocket, sets himself. He throws it nearly 50 yards cross field from the right to the left, right into the bucket of his receiver, who gets a touchdown because of how well placed it is. And whilst he's throwing that ball, he's got 2 defenders right up in his face who level him after he's made the throw. So you've got the calm, decisive decision-making on the ball, and you've got the strength to throw it cross field that far into a bucket. Guy doesn't have to break stride catching the thing. It looked great. And there are so many examples of this on tape where the deep ball, he throws it into a bucket. It is an inconsistent thing, but when he does it right, it looks really good. And with a bit more consistency, he's only going to get better. He can make plays in big time situations as well when he's most needed. So one of the best games this year, and Ryan will attest to this, was the FCS quarterfinal. When they played against Sacramento State, it was an absolute barnstormer of a game, which maybe Incarnate Word should not have won. But in the last drive, he's driving to win the game, converts a 3rd and 7 with his legs on the fly when the play breaks down to keep it alive. I think he forced 2 missed tackles on that run alone to be able to keep the game going for them. And then the final touchdown pass is just this perfectly weighted throw right into the corner of the end zone, right into his receiver's mid-drift, who's falling backwards. The DB can't make a play on it because he's the only one who can get it. And it was as clutch a throw as they come in such a big situation. So he's a guy who's got all the sets of throws and he can do it when it really matters. And then off the field, he's a very high character guy. He's very driven, very determined to succeed in the face of a lot of adversity he's faced throughout his college career. So it's not just his size. He is one of those small guys who has a chip on his shoulder about it all. But in trying to find the opportunity to succeed as well, he's transferred 4 times, which some might go, red flag. Doesn't bother me in this case. 2 of the times he was searching for starting opportunity because he wasn't he wasn't willing to just sit there and wait to see if it happened. And then the other 2, on the back of his success in JUCO and the back of his success at Nicholls State, he transferred to a higher lewer of competition to, try and keep building up his draft stock. And I've got absolutely no problem with that there, considering the first 4 or 5 years for him were really rough in that he wasn't getting played. He had to miss because of COVID, because of transfer rules. To still see that will and desire to want to go out there and play, for me, it's a really big part of why I like him. So, let's say, dual threat guy, characters there, the story, it's great. There's a lot of stuff to like about him. Now, issues, because I've kind of made him sound like Drew Brees at this point, which he is not. But when it comes to the running side of the game, there is one issue. It's his ball security. There is an issue there. 19 fumbles in the last 3 seasons. 9 of those came this season, and 3 of them came in the semi-final, which I'll talk about in a moment. So this needs to be a point of focus for him, protecting the ball a bit better. But if you sort that out, then there are no obvious deficiencies in his run game. So that's close to being as good as you really want it to be. And whilst the passing is pretty solid, he needs to keep on developing, as all quarterbacks do. A little more consistency would not go amiss. But, I mean, for where you're going to be drafted in, which is going to be day 3 or undrafted free agency at this point, probably undrafted free agency, it's a lot higher than you can expect from a lot of guys that you're going to find around that point. Then you've got the age and the size issue. So obviously age, 24, size 5'10", that will be a problem for some. But again, you're picking day 3, you're picking undrafted free agency. So the issues become more minor than they do at the top. And as I've already shown you, the size with him isn't really an issue when it comes to the passing or his durability. He's been pretty healthy during his career, no major injuries, so to speak. He looks after himself well on the field, doesn't put himself in harm's way. So the size is an issue there. And the age, you can take it or leave it, but 24 is still pretty young in the grand scheme of things. And then the one issue that did give me a bit of cause for concern was the FCS semi-final against North Dakota State. He threw 2 picks in that game and he fumbled the ball 3 times in a game that arguably they should have won. So it does raise some questions about what he might be like when real pressure games arrive. So it is a thing to watch out on. I mean, he showed up for his team in the quarterfinal. It got a little bit too big for him in the semi. So it's an issue to keep an eye on. But when all is said and done, you're not spending a first-round pick on this guy. So these things you can work on and things that aren't going to matter as much if you're spending that level of a pick on a guy. So when all is said and done, how does he fit Detroit? For me, he fits us very damn well. Now, the great part about Lindsey Scott Jr. and what you can do with him, if you draft him or you get him in priority free agency, whatever, he instantly upgrades your scout team. He has high-level experience as a scout team quarterback. And in terms of what the Lions have, he offers a true dual threat that the Lions simply don't have. So it gives them a new level of preparation, against this new breed of mobile quarterbacks in the league, something we've struggled with for years. You get him in this team, you get him playing the way he does, it's going to give you invaluable preparation against some of these guys. And whilst you're doing that, you're able to develop all this potential upside of him. Now, for me, he's got the potential upside of maybe a low-level quarterback 1, certainly a high-level backup that you can use situationally and who can come into the team and keep the ship steady whilst your starter is out. And I say that because both aspects of his game, passing and running as a dual threat guy, there are no real red flags in there. It's just a course of developing him right. So you've got nothing but upside in terms of this guy. You're not going to be spending very much on him. So for me, it's insane value. He can give you benefits right away and in the long term. So I just am really high on this guy. I don't know why there's not much more buzz about him. He's my favourite sleeper in this draft, one of. That's Lindsay Scott Jr., and hopefully you'll hear that name a lot more in the near future.
Boys, thoughts on Lindsay Scott Jr.?
The expert to speak.
Yeah, he rode his luck in the playoffs. Probably shouldn't have beaten Sac State and then, like I say, all those turnovers. But if I'm pretty sure, I can't remember which game, but I'm pretty sure he set the Div 1 record for the most touchdowns in a half. It was either 6 or 7. I'm sure he scored like 7 touchdowns in the first half of
7.
10, yeah. He had like the best half of football anyone's ever seen at Div 1 level. He was ridiculous. Yeah, he is a phenomenal guy. He's made some questionable decisions, like the transfer's fine, but when he went to Missouri, that was probably a mistake. I think that was probably a little bit speculative that he gets that job there. But if we're talking about guys coming out of the FCS, he's the best. I don't think there's a better undrafted free agent priority QB than him coming out of the FCS. I said this year he had a phenomenal run. He had one of the best seasons I've ever seen. It was as good as Joe Burrow, basically, just with a few more turnovers. Yeah, the ball security. Sometimes he carries the ball like a loaf of bread when he should be carrying it like a newborn baby. Yeah. But that a lot of guys do that. Like I said, it's just his style. But no, I love the kid. I say if we bring him in or whoever he goes, like it's a UDFA, I feel like he's got a great chance to be a QB2, QB3, and he won't cost you anything. He's all upside.
Brandiser says that Lindsay Scott should hire Anthony Fitzpatrick as his agent. Ash, do you have any thoughts on Lindsay Scott?
Sounds like sounds like a guy that Dan, Brad, Ben, Tanner Engstrand, Mark Brunel, JT Barrett, all the guys that sort of will have interests. Sounds someone they will like a lot, because I think they can teach the ball security. That's probably one of the easiest things to probably teach a player is ball security, rather than fixing someone's mechanics or teach them how to properly process a defense. So it's something that's definitely fixable. And as you say, if he is a pro to UDFA and it's all upside, there's nothing, you're losing nothing, but you could gain something remarkable. You could, as if he does reach a QB2 level, like, I don't know, a Snoop Huntley kind of level, where he shows flashes and he's consistent enough that you can maybe start in 1 or 2 games if your star gets injured and he can run a dual threat offense. That's perfect, because that's what their modern NFL needs. You need someone who can move. Goff's good enough at movement, but having that little threat that can make the defenses aware and give you that little edge, especially if you are having to play him as a backup, it just gives you that little extra edge to play with.
It's not been his agent, Grandizer. It's just giving everyone a fair platform. Some guys just get underappreciated, so you have to, big them up. And go watch him play. Honestly, you will fall in love with him very, very quickly.
All right, Ryan, why don't you take us away with your first?
Up first, I've got Malik Cunningham, the quarterback from Louisville. Malik, if you squint your eyes and look through a frosted glass, you'd see Lamar Jackson. If you open your eyes, he's more Janet Jackson. This is not complimentary. So he's undersized at 6 foot, 192 pounds. He's got 31 and 3/8 inch quarter arms, 9.5 inch hands. Ran a very good 40, 453, 151, 10-yard split, but he decided not to do any of the drills. So from 2018 to 2022, he served as Lamar's backup and took over the starting role for the Louisville Cardinals. 9,664 passing yards, 70 touchdowns, 29 interceptions, 3,184 rushing yards for 50 touchdowns. So the Cardinals, underwhelmed. Louisville have not been very good this time, if I'm honest, in an ACC that kind of was there for the take on that half. Like I say, they could have been better, it should have been better. He was supposed to be the heir apparent to Lamar. Didn't pan out. If you're looking for a quarterback, if you're looking for a quarterback to command a scheme where he can play wildcat and he can play lots of QB draw and a QB stretch, perfect. His IQ is really good. He recognizes when defensive end are crashing down and to pull the bread out of the running back's basket and take off himself. And he knows when to let it go and let the running back take the punishment. He is a red zone nightmare because he's incredibly shifty. He is really good in the open field. He does not go up the slides when he sees the first down marker. He goes for the home run. So he's a very experienced guy. Like I say, he's had a long career. I think as well he's got versatility to play other positions. I would not be surprised if he's an NFL running back. And I think he could do it pretty well if you put on a few pounds. He's kind of built like that triangle from Mr. Men. He's a bit top heavy. And when you get downstairs, he's got legs like French fries. That is an issue. Accuracy, short to medium, inconsistent, but that's not terrible. Deep ball, doesn't have one. He can't throw deep. Like I said, his targets might get deep, might get free. Ball's not getting there unless he's doing and he's throwing on the run, rolling out. Pocket, it's kind of weak, and that is worrying. So I look at comps. I actually see a lot of Derek King, and I say this because Derek King was signed by the DC Defenders, which are 6-1 in the USFL. He is the backup to Jordan Ta'amu, and he gets all his touches in the red zone. He's scored lots of touchdowns in the USFL this year, in the XFL. He's also got lots of zone reads, zone draws, lots of carries, and they are the best QB tandem in the XFL. And as a day 3 UDFA, I think Malik Cunningham can be exactly that. I say Trace McSorley, when the Baltimore Ravens drafted him, they tried him, had him running, then played him at corner. I think someone's going to do the same thing with Cunningham. Draft him, get him in the red zone, he'll score touchdowns. If he doesn't pan out, try to put him at running back. I feel like he's the kind of guy that will do everything to see the field. So, does he fit the Lions? No, I don't think so. I mean, unless you want, like, say, a true dual threat that's more of a runner for, like, say, practicing and to go up against on the defense. He might be good in the red zone to pick up those, like, 2-point conversions. He can stretch a defense and get to the pylon. But as a passer, 70 touchdowns to 29 interceptions, it's a little bit misleading. Like I say, he commanded some good offenses, but he didn't win a ton of games. And he's not, the arm isn't just isn't there for me. So I'd have to go like, he's probably going from like late 6th to undrafted. That's probably where you're going to get him. I feel like if he goes in the 7th round, that's probably fair. But yeah, he's very durable. He's taken a lot of carries. I'll give him that. He has taken a lot of touches in the 4 years, and he's picked up a few knocks, but for the best part of it, he's been pretty available for the majority of it, despite quite a heavy workload. Patchy blocking as well. He's taken a bit of wear and tear, but he's still pretty physical. To say his frame isn't the best. Puts on a bit of muscle. I feel like with how the NFL goes now, we'd like to say the dual threat, the guy that can take off like Justin Fields did against the Lions, torch you for 65 yards. Malik could very much do that. I feel like he has got those traits right now that the new modern football game kind of covets, which works in his favour. So I feel like someone's going to throw a bone at him. And if they don't, I think he'll play professional football in another league. Like say the CFL, like say the XFL. I feel like Malik Cunningham will play pro football somewhere at some level. And it could be a practice squad guy all year. He's the ideal candidate that you stash away. You let him practice. And if for any reason you have to suit up a guy in a day, I feel like he's the kind of guy you'd bring up. So it can be a dynamic weapon if he's drafted by the right team, put in the same scheme. Like I say, Wildcat can cause some teams a headache. He'd be the perfect candidate to run that kind of trick play, special teams. He'll probably do whatever you ask of him. He's a smart guy. He's around 24, so he's also, the trend seems to be a lot of guys are talking about today is a lot of them are a bit older. He's been around the block a few times, but to his credit, that's not too bad. He was never going to fill the shoes of Lamar Jackson. It just wasn't possible. He's just not got the arm. He just can't make the throws. But everything else below the waist, he can be the exact same person. So think of him as the pound shop Lamar Jackson. And that's not to discredit him. That's just the shoes are too big to fill. And the Cardinals, yeah, they scored heavily in their time. He put up some very good numbers. Probably wasn't his fault that he won as many games as he should because the defense, well, a bit blah. So, yeah, he's a solid product.
Let this be a lesson to everyone to not have a swig of their drink before Ryan McCluskey makes a quarterback comparison, because that almost ended me, Ryan. Boys, thoughts on Malik Cunningham?
I mean, he's been compared to Janet Jackson. What really can you do more as like after that to try and say out about? I mean, it's quite ironic that he uses that because obviously Janet and Michael did a duet together called Scream, and if you watch Malik play, he makes you want to scream a lot because of the stupid decision making all the time, and you know that's the story with him. I mean, a couple of years ago, especially on the college pod, we were talking about him in more glowing terms, potentially. Look, he's this really good potential dual threat guy who has all the ability he needs. He just needs to be a lot better with his decision making. He needs to be a lot less hasty trying to start running out of the pocket. I mean, maybe the team need to use him a bit more as a passer as well, rather than just design running for him all the time. But in the 2 years kind of since we had those views, nothing has changed with him. He's still the same guy. There's still the same inconsistent passer who makes bad decisions, who is more prone to running first before looking and surveying his field, just thinking his legs will get it done all the time, and who the team have just kind of really used as a glorified running back to go with it. So there's just too much there that you're like, oh, it's not great. I mean, I go back to Lindsay, and with a dual threat quarterback, you kind of want them to be pass first, run second. That's what you want from a dual threat quarterback. You want him to have the know-how to look for his passes, go through his reads, scan the field, and then think, right, now I've got to run the ball or I've got to do something with it. He doesn't do that. And it's just a case of it's going to be, he's going to be a running guy first. And I just don't think he offers you the upside as a passer to really make any damage going forward. So he's highly frustrating. He had so much talent and he's just not developed anywhere near to the potential he could have done. Otherwise, if he'd have developed and if he'd looked really good, you could be talking maybe not Anthony Richardson territory, but not far behind. That was his ceiling, but that's gone now. So I've got no more desire to see him in a Lions uniform.
Of course, I've only seen one game of him this year. You can guess against two. And he did torture us on the ground. He really did. So look at his PFF, 81.5 running grade against us. He got something like 127 yards. He got 2 touchdowns against us. He was very good on the ground. Passing wise, his one touchdown came from a screen where the running back did everything else. He had a chance to beat us. We had to play back up in everything. Had a chance, couldn't do it. And I remember early in the college days, it was bigged up. So some people, I'm not pointing fingers, said he was better than a certain other QB in the ACC who wears a sort of reddy colour. Obviously, that's come back to bite them, but
that's
he
still
did have
undecided.
that potential. Is it?
I mean, so I remember one distinct quote from last season, which is, "Don't worry about drafting Malik Willis. Malik Willis isn't the best Malik in college football right now." Like, that quote stands out to me quite well. And to be honest, given how Malik's done so far at the NFL, Malik Willis, you might still be right. But,
Yeah.
Anyway.
But yeah, it's just Taysom Hill 2.0, but slightly smaller. That's all he's probably ever going to be. Maybe in NFL, he's just sort of red zone threat. You can run the ball with him. You can use him to pass a few touchdowns in the red zone. Maybe get him on a few receivers. Because I think he's also had like a couple of receptions this season. That's probably his ceiling in the NFL now. Probably, yeah, that like the Eric King sort of red zone weapon.
All right, time to move on to the next one, and it's me, and it is Clayton Tune from the Houston Cougars. 24 years old, redshirt senior, 6'2" and 4/10", 220 pounds. ran the 40 and 4.64 with a rapid 10-yard split of 1.55. But considering that 10-yard split, his shuttle of 4.25, while it sounds okay, is perhaps a bit slower than you'd think from a guy that has an elite first step. So his side-to-side movement perhaps is not as good as that short area quickness in a straight line. 3-star recruit out of high school. In his career, played 47 games, 956 completions on 1,497 attempts, a 64% completion rate, 11,994 yards in his career, 104 touchdowns to 41 interceptions, so significant number of interceptions. However, in the most recent season, he had a big uptick in form. In fact, in the last 2 years, he's had 2 really, really good years in this Houston team. 13 games, 67.3% completion rates. That's 3.3% higher than his career average. 4,074 yards, 40 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, which means that in the remainder of his career, he had a 2-to-1 touchdown ratio, but in this year, 4-to-1, so much better. PFF grade this year of 91.5, but in 2021, it was 90.8, so he's stacked back-to-back good years per PFF. And I watched a couple of games of his at Cincinnati in 2021. That's the conference championship game, and then versus Tulane in this most recent season. And the strengths of Clayton Tune, first and foremost, it's an RPO-based offense, so that comes with its own limitations. He's in RPO, or he's just operating entirely out the shotgun. You're not going to see this guy in a center, but he's deceptively quick as a runner. And obviously, you say 1.55 10-yard split, of course he's going to be. But he's not as stacked as you think he might be. 6'2.5", 220. He sounds like he's sort of that prototypical sort of quarterback build, but he's a bit slight, actually. But he's rapid with his legs. He just doesn't maybe have quite that impact. You do see him flying backwards sometimes when he gets hit, which is not ideal, but sometimes he can just maneuver around people in a way you don't expect. He does a lot of design runs. He does a lot of zone keepers too. And he's actually quite good at minimizing contact. So for someone that does run the ball as much as he does, he's an exceptionally good slider. He might do it a touch early and maybe sacrifice a yard to do so. But for someone that runs the ball as much as he does, he minimizes contact, which is a good thing. He's a very accurate short to intermediate passer. He's got good strength to zip the ball in at a moment's notice. So even when it looks like they're double covered, if he gets a small window in that short to intermediate range, he can get it in there with power. And I really like that about him. He's got nice touch on his passes. He throws a very catchable ball in that sort of range. So anywhere on the field, whether it's over the middle or out to the sidelines, he can do that all. He's a reasonable arm talent generally. It takes him a little while to kind of wind up the arm if he's going deep. He does lack a little bit of power deep, and it does affect his accuracy when he tries to wind up. But he is capable of getting it, 40 yards downfield, but maybe not much further than that. He takes what he can, and I really appreciate that about a quarterback. He is good at reading in snap decisions, and if one of his receivers gets a step in the first half a second, he's going to take it every single time. It made for an efficient Houston offense. And he gets through his progressions well. If he sees that someone hasn't made that step, he'll get through 2-3 guys regularly in his progressions. Moving on to his weaknesses, I did mention that he kind of lacks deep ball arm strength, which does limit his upside as a passer. And he's prone to some poor decision-making sometimes. He can make that snap read, but then every now and again, you'll just see some sort of boneheaded decision, whether, I said that he can fit it into that window where, the window's closing, but he can get it in there. But sometimes the window isn't there and he throws it anyway. I've seen several times where you're running a really simple running back screen, or just a dump off to the running back, and it's been blown up before he's thrown the ball, but he's thrown it anyway, and it's just one of those things where if that goes wrong, it's going back the other way for 6, and it's really risky sometimes. And actually, he has a bit of a blind spot in not seeing defensive backs and linebackers who aren't moving. It's almost cat-like at times, where I'll throw my cat a treat, and if the treat's moving, it can see it, but if you drop it on the floor, it'll be searching for it for ages, and there's just multiple instances of linebackers spying him He just doesn't see them, and it's really infuriating. They've got to be moving to kind of come into the vision. He's elusive, as I kind of was saying before in terms of his quick first step, but sometimes he chooses the wrong direction to escape into and just runs into sacks, and kind of frustrating. It puts the ball at risk because he's kind of running into harm's way without having secured the ball, which I don't like. The Houston offense was a bit basic. Tank Dell, I think, was it is Tank Dell, isn't it? It was at Houston, yeah. Obviously a speedy guy, but barring that, there was kind of slants and wide receiver screens and sometimes a quick out route, but there wasn't much going on in terms of like complex route trees or anything like that for the receivers, and that kind of hurt Tune's development as a passer, I think, because he wasn't asked to do a hell of a lot, really. I did say that he walks into sacks, and he's got fumble issues with the ball in hand, and for someone who likes to keep the ball as much as he does in hand, you've got to be able to secure the ball better than he does. And we've been saying it before about a different prospect, and maybe it's an easy thing to fix, but you run an RPO-based offense, you run zone reads, you run quarterback keepers, quarterback ball control, ball security has got to be at the top of the agenda, and Tune just didn't have as much attention to detail as you'd like especially from an older prospect. The other thing is he struggles to throw with anticipation, so he can see that someone wins quickly, but that is normally a separation-based thing, whereas if it's someone becoming free later on in the route, he can't throw it early, and that limits, again, how much he can do as a passer. So that deep ball and the anticipation throws aren't really there, which is just frustration when you can see it on tape and he can't see it. The other thing is, his O-line was quite good last year, gave him plenty of time to throw, in multiple instances of him having 3, 4, 5 seconds in the pocket. And to his credit, he's not trying to throw too quickly, and he's letting things develop. But sometimes I'm thinking, you're not having a sort of stressful time in the pocket like you're going to see in the NFL. And I do wonder that if he's put under a bit more pressure, whether he's actually going to take it particularly well. I haven't been able to tell whether it's something that he's actually particularly good at. The final thing is just it's Houston's offense rather than him. There's multiple instances of his receivers not winning, and he just sits in the pocket wondering where to go, and then just ends up running it when it's not really a good thing to do either, just as a sort of last resort thing. There's no window for him to do that either. And I mean, sometimes you just like him to throw it away when there's nothing there, and he just doesn't really do that either. So, projection for Clayton, he's got the tools in the short range. I think he could operate a Goff-style offense quite well if you're not asking him to throw the ball deep. He's accurate in that short to intermediate range. He can throw with power. The anticipation isn't quite there, but as someone who's going to be a day 3 pick, I kind of like him coming to the Lions. He's a likable guy. He throws a pretty pass, so I can see him coming in, but I'd probably put a 6th round grade on him, which is maybe a bit lower than the consensus out there. I think he's more mocked around the late 4th or early 5th, so I'm a little bit lower on him than the consensus, but he's someone I'd like to have here. He's clearly a reasonable leader. I mean, I did say before that, the offense isn't fantastic, and maybe he could have done something about that, but I have come out liking him. He's clearly had a good year, but he's left something on the table for me in the last couple of seasons, despite being graded really, really well by PFF. Boys, Clayton Tune, any thoughts?
I mean, sorry, go on, Ryan.
I like him. Statistically, one of the greatest AAC quarterbacks of all time. Pretty sure he's in top 3. I know Holton Ahlers was 2nd. I think Clayton Tune might be 1st in AAC passing yards of all time. Pretty sure he is. Completions and touchdowns is up there. I like him, but I've seen him now reach his ceiling. So Dana Holgerson, his head coach, he's from the Mike Leach air raid branch of coaches down the line. So he's commanded that kind of offense. He's a dink and dunker, like you say. Short to intermediate, fast balls, windows. He can march down the field. I don't think he could throw a 50-yard ball like their time in the NFL. I just don't think the arms got it. I say the biggest issue for me is that I've always seen, I've watched a lot of him. I say he hangs onto the ball far too long. I say he waits for things to develop sometimes, and they're just not developing, and he kind of doesn't know what to do. He doesn't have the fight or flight. He doesn't think, oh, do you know what? I'll just take off. Sometimes I just think, oh, someone will get free, someone will get free. Shit, someone's getting in my face. And then, let's say, the fumbles. If you're looking for a pure backup, I feel like a day three, he's one of the best options. That is purely, I think, his ceiling. I don't think he's going to surprise anyone. He's one of the best and most experienced QBs we're talking about today. Like he's had lots of success with the Cougars. He has led some powerful offenses. He's scored a lot of points. He has racked up a lot of scores. I would have liked to see him leave Houston, if I'm honest. I feel like he achieved more than he could there. I feel like in the end it was a bit comfortable, as you say. The O-line was really good. He got a bit complacent. I feel like I'd have liked to see him take a step up. He probably could have done as well. I feel like he could have gone to the Big 10 or the Big 12, sat in the AAC a little bit too long. But as a day three guy, I think I'd probably take him first of the other options. I'm a big fan of him. Like I say, he's got everything to command the Carolines offense. You're not going to ask him to make the money shot because he's never had to really do that right now in his current team. So he's very well rounded. He's got a decent arm. He's got a good fast ball, fits into a window. So he's got the things you can't teach. If he can make the jump to the next level, I suppose that's what we'll see next. I feel it'll depend entirely where he goes and what round as well. I couldn't take him before the fifth. That's a little bit rich for my blood.
No, he's another one of those quarterbacks who's sort of garnered tons of stats in college, but I mean, there's just not really everything there to back it up with him. I mean, I know he said he's got the 40 touchdowns this year, but I mean, you can condense, there were several games. I mean, I think you can condense in a 4-game period over half of his production for this season, especially that SMU game when Tanner Mordecai got like 10 touchdowns and he got 8. You know, it's kind of a little bit misleading. They started the season slow. I mean, in fairness, their defense is absolutely trash, and he's had to try and bury them, you know, had to dig them out a hole all this time. But it's kind of just, it just smacks a little of air raid, just like Bailey Zappe did last year. And he doesn't have the final third of the field ability. The short and intermediate stuff is great, but like you said, there's an RPO offense that works in a certain way, and the final third of the field, the deep balls, the accuracy, the arm strength, it's just not there. And you kind of want that in your quarterback at the next level. I mean, we kind of lambast Goff for not having maybe the greatest deep arm in the world in that final third. And, you know, you don't want to be drafting that again when there are other guys around in this draft who do. So, yeah, great college quarterback, but I just don't see it translating unless he lands in a system which is incredibly friendly to the way he plays. But I don't feel like there's that many teams knocking around at the minute who would do that. So again, I think it's a day 3 prospect. And as I kind of mentioned again with Lindsay Elliott, it doesn't really offer you anything to start with. I mean, it's not like he's going to give you something on a scout team. It's not like he's going to give you immediate relief there. It's going to be several years of building him up with no real role for him, bar than being a clipboard holder, and then maybe something might happen with him. So it's not my cup of tea for this, but as a quarterback at college, he's been incredibly fun to watch. But me and Rans both said the same about him and Mordecai at the start of this season. This was the season for both of them to make a jump and prove something that we'd not seen before, to put themselves amongst the elite in this class, and neither of them did.
Any thoughts, Sash, or are you?
Sounds like, as they said, typical air raid quarterback coming out of college. So Zappi, Minshew, that kind of guy where they might get their stats in college, but yeah, at the next level, they're going to be nothing more than sort of like a high-end, low volatility backup where they can run the short and intermediate stuff. Maybe against man coverage, convert the sticks a bit, but other than that, you're not really going to get that much more out of them.
Yeah, all right, we move on, Ash, to your second guy.
So we're going to look at Aidan O'Connell, the Purdue quarterback. Kind of similar in a way in the fact that he's very experienced, but in more of a pro-style offense than an RPO/air raid one. So O'Connell, Raz, not applicable because we've only got height, weight, and hand size for him. He's done no other drills as far as I can tell. So he's 6'3" and 3/10, and he's 213 pounds with 9 7 3/4 hands. This past year, he's had a 68.2 offensive grade with 67.3 passing and 61.1 run. And I watched him against Penn State and Wisconsin, which were both below average games for him. So 57.9 offensive grade against Penn State, and then 59.9 offensive grade against Wisconsin. So his strength, first one is experience. He's one of the most experienced quarterbacks in this class. And he would be a great culture fit for us because he's a former walk-on who won the starting job and sort of took over and made it his own this past couple of years. He could run what I'm going to class as the offense really well, takes up what's schemed up for him with little problems, and he's tough. He can stay in the pocket and takes hits when it's there. The best thing about him is, in terms of his throwing, is that his game is built on anticipatory throws. So his 2.45 seconds time to throw is one of the quickest in the class per PFF. And he attacks underneath and the middle of the field really well. And he leads his receivers well as well, always anticipates where they're going to be open, as I said, and gets the balls into windows when they're there. And he has a really good processor. He can use touch as well, so the ball is very catchable for a receiver. He's not really lasering it in there when he doesn't have to. It's very easy for the receiver to catch. And he has a decent fake handoff for play action. And in the running game, he can move the stick on scrambles sometimes and can generate reasonable push on QB sneaks. But he's not exactly going to ever be like your sort of great athlete. He's probably going to run like a 4.9, 40-yard dash if you ask him to. Does Tiny sometimes look like he's running through treacle at times, but it's nothing too major. Weakness, age. He'll be 25 in September. So again, maybe he's hit his ceiling in terms of what he can be. You're not going to get much more development out of him. And for someone who has a weak arm, he tries too many YOLO balls deep down the field. He tries to fit it into tight windows too often down there. And when he tries to try and fit it in there, it just ruins his spiral. His accuracy goes to absolute kaput. He might be trying to throw a receiver on the hash mark and it goes out of bounds to their right because he just doesn't have accuracy downfield. And he does have a tendency to stare down his receivers. So the first interception he threw against Wisconsin, he stares down the receiver, and the defender, who is someone we've heard about last week, John Torchio, reads his eyes, jumps the ball, and it's a pick six. And his throwing motion is very unconventional. He doesn't use his hips at all. It's very much like, when you're sort of passing the ball around to your friends in the park on a nice summer's day, you're just using your arm, not really doing much, and it doesn't go that far. That's how he throws. It's very, very unconventional, and most teams probably won't like it. And he can't really get that much out of structure. He just takes what's there, and then he can't see anything, he just throws the ball away. And he didn't have the best O-line in college, so pressure can force him into bad decisions. So his second interception against Wisconsin, there was a free rusher through the A gap. It forces him into a quick read, and the defender just jumps the ball and brings it down. And as I mentioned before, he won't hurt defenses with his legs. Maybe convert the sticks to like a sort of 3rd and 5, but anything more than that probably is going to be an issue for him. So PFF compares him to Trevor Siemian, but I think I've used Case Keenum as my comparison. He's good pro-style QB who won't take too many risks if you sort of scheme up stuff. Doesn't have a top-tier arm and has mere rushing upside, but is dependable. If you need him to start a couple of games because your QB's injured and you're in a pro-style, he'll be able to do it for you. But anything more than that, you're probably going to start losing games. So he's QB8 and the 160th overall prospect on our consensus boards is around the middle of the 5th rounder, but he falls in between our 5th round at 152 and our first 6 at 183. That 5th 152 might be a bit too rich for me, but if he falls to that 183 and we haven't taken a backup quarterback yet, I'd take the card in for him because with a slightly better O-line and then a few more weapons than he's had at Purdue. So obviously this year he had Payne Durham and he had Charlie Jones, the receiver, both of whom are good prospects in his class. He could be a defendable backup for us, though. As I said, if you ask him to start more than like 2 games in a season, this sort of bad decision making, especially deep, could lose you a game where you need him to look after the ball. He just tries to go deep with JMO and it just gets picked and he loses you a game. So for us at least, dependable backup, probably that's what he's ever going to be, just sort of QB2 career guy who just goes around like the team's just earning a bit of money, sort of like Chase Daniel. Is that it?
Ant, thoughts on Aidan O'Connell?
Oh, anyone who listens to the College Pod knows I love AOC. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks, and he has been for the last few years. Just that offense that Purdue have ran is just so pretty on its day, and he's a really good quarterback. I think I listed him as the second best in the Big Ten at the start of this season. I think there was only really CJ who was above him. Still of that opinion, it's CJ Stroud, then it's Aidan O'Connell when it comes to your quarterback rankings in the Big Ten, just because he has just such great natural ability. Just want to hit, he can sort of, again, hit the three levels of the field. You know, he's a big, explosive playmaker. And you can see just how good he is by all the talent he sort of brings up around him. So first he had David Bell, who was, you know, had some terrific times there at Purdue, turned into one of the best receivers in the class last year. Got harshly done because of certain things, I believe, but he'll be a good guy in the NFL. And then you sort of had Charlie Jones, who came in this season. We were a bit, is he kind of going to be the same? You know, losing David Bell's a big thing, and they just formed a connection like that. And Charlie Jones suddenly became one of the hottest commodities at wide receiver in college football, not in terms of the draft, but in terms of just outright who's doing the best. He had a stunning start to the season and had a great year all throughout. So that's what good quarterbacks do. They just keep elevating new wide receivers to a high level who maybe shouldn't. Because people were trash talking Bell, people were trash talking Jones, said they're not the best in the world. Well, the college production will tell you otherwise. And, you know, I hope he gets an opportunity at the next level. I do agree, maybe he's not going to be a starter going up as much as I like him and I need to take the blinkers off a little bit, but I think he's certainly done enough to earn a shot at being able to. And if you're looking for a guy who, at the very minimum, you can develop into a really solid backup in, again, maybe sort of that pro-style theme, I think he's one of the guys who should be at the top of your list. I mean, you know, take the age aside, he's got the arm, he's got the instincts, he's got the skill, he's got great touch on his throws as well. So I genuinely do think that he'll make a good backup in this league. And if you need him to come in and win you a game or see one out, I think he's capable of that as well. So, I really like him. Not for us, not personally for us, as much as I would like to see him here, but not for us. I would prefer to go in a different direction. But no, I really like him as a quarterback.
It depends on what direction the Lions want to go in at backup quarterback, because if they want someone to operate the Goff offense, there's no one better to come in as a backup. If they want someone who's going to provide them with practice upside, to provide something a bit different, who perhaps could complement Goff on the field, potentially, then he's clearly not the guy. So, you know, pick your poison, really. I kind of feel like he's going to be high on the Lions' agenda. I think that they're going to want someone to run the Goff offense, because that's what it's built for right now. As much as I would love to see a dual threat guy come in and be the developmental guy, I think they're going to prioritize right here, right now, and he, for me, is that guy. He's, for me, probably quite near his ceiling. I don't see him getting a huge amount better than he is, but he's fine right now. Like, yeah, there's clearly limitations with him, but he can run the Goff offense. I definitely believe that. So I think he's someone that there's a reasonably good likelihood he ends up here. Ryan, any more thoughts?
Muted.
Aidan, yeah. I'd say when I look at his time at college, he's probably one of the guys that we're talking about that's come closest to causing big upset. I said Purdue have hung with Ohio State a few times. Some good games in Michigan and Wisconsin, the bigger Big Ten sides. So he's fared well in the tougher scenarios and the bigger the competition. He's faced some of the better competition we're talking about. He's a very good pocket passer. Like I say, he can make all the throws. He's got good touch. Like I say, he's worked with some good receivers. Like I say, last year, TJ Sheffield, like I say, Bell, Jones, Durham Payne. He's going to get drafted. Likes his tight ends. I'd say that they operate that system really well. So he has his guys. He's safe. He's comfortable. He can do everything that's required. I'd say he's not a runner. He's never going to be. That's just not his style. But he knows what he's good at. And he could be a Nick Mullins, he could be a Case Keenum, like a Taylor Heineke, like I say. He could be a high level backup that could come in and win 4 games if Goff hurts his ankle and then just goes back to the bench. Like I say, that's the kind of guy he'll be. There's some kind of guys that you can draft as a backup and you think they could win a game if they're thrown in the second half. Can they defend a 10-point lead? Is Aiden one of those guys? Probably, yeah. Would Malik do that? No, I wouldn't trust him. I won't trust half the guys spoken about, but I'd expect that he would be someone that could come in under pressure and just finish off a job if needed be. And that's probably the highest praise that I can give to backup. He's probably a mixture of day 2, day 3. It's a very varied gap of where he's going to be taken. Some people really do like him. They might stretch to a 4th rounder, maybe. I say. For me, I don't know, another 5th, 6th. Depends on if they really want to spend a commodity on a backup. But for short-term investment or short-term return, maybe one of the quicker ones if you make an investment in him.
All right, let's get moving. And Ant, you're next up for your second guy.
Right. So next up, just bear with me a minute. So, yeah, I'm in the realm of the FCS again with my second one. I have picked Jalen Fowler, who is the quarterback from the North Carolina A&T Aggies, of course, Brad Holmes' alma mater. He is 23 years old. It may seem like a really random one, but I did this because I know the Lions have shown bona fide interest in him quite so much. So it's like, well, I'll go and have a look at this guy, see what he's a little bit like, cover all bases, because I'm still of the opinion that they're going to go day 3 or undrafted free agent this year. So I think looking at these guys will pay off in the long run. So yeah, Jalen Fowler, North Carolina A&T, he is 6'3", he is 235 pounds. So unlike Lindsey Scott Jr., the frame, the desired height, everything is there for him. Now, me and Ryan were chatting about him a few weeks ago on the college pod when we did our HBCU episode. Dave, our good friend from Panthers Nation podcast, is a North Carolina A&T alum. So he got to tell us a little bit about him there, so you can hear a little bit about him on that show as well, if you want. And I think the conclusion we came up to in regards to him, because Dave didn't do a very good sell job to start with, was massive untapped potential because of scheme, quote Dave from PNP and myself. And having watched him, I think that is absolutely the case here. So his college stats, overall, he's been going 3 years, 3,737 passing yards, 27 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, 397 rushing yards, and 1 touchdown on the ground. He is classified as a dual threat quarterback, and he is, although it's not really been the case in college for him. Now, on the surface, very little stands out in terms of things to like about him. I'm just going to be completely and utterly honest with you all here. So he has struggled to hold down a starting job at A&T, where he's been for the last 3 years. He sort of lost the job towards the end of last season, had a few niggling injuries, and he actually lost out in camp this past season to a redshirt freshman of all players, who took his job from him. And it took until game 4 of the season, when the Aggies had to use 4 quarterbacks in a game because of injuries and various problems, before he was able to get that job back. So obviously not the best of starts for the season there. But after that, the rest of the season, the starting job was his. As a runner, like Lindsey Scott Jr., he has a fumbling problem, but this is a really big problem. And how big, you ask? He's fumbled the ball 11 times on 32 carries this season. So 1 in every 3 carries, he fumbles the ball. That is... which may go some way to explaining why he has not been given so many carries by the team this season. Although the starting running backs have been very effective for them, and there has been little need to use the quarterback, but it does handicap his ability to show his dual threat when he's fumbling it all the damn time. And as a passer, the career completion rating is a shade below 59%, which isn't great. It comes with a 2-to-1 touchdown ratio, or slightly worse than that, actually, which is nothing to shout home about. And the turnover-worthy play rate is 5%, which is also very poor. It would have, I think, put him in like the low 20s out of 32 in the NFL this year. So he struggled to establish himself as a starter. He has a huge problem with the run game, which is meant to be part of his dual threat ability, namely the fumbling, and nearly all aspects of the passing game need polish. So why should we care? Now, the sell job I did from Lindsay, this all sounds really bad now, but a lot of this, and Dave mentioned it as well, a lot of it lies in the system he has grown up with. So for those who don't know, the HBCU, North Carolina A&T, they are traditionally a run-heavy, run-first offense where quarterback development is not really a high priority. In Dave's words, they're running back you and offensive tackle you. Nothing really to do with quarterbacks. And in some part, explains the low productivity numbers in college because he is not called upon to do as much quarterback work as a lot of other guys in systems where they're not so run-heavy. And also you have the added problem where the offensive line are much better versed in run blocking than pass protection, which makes his job a lot harder because he's got to run around all over the place because he's under pressure all the time because his linemen are not as good at pass blocking as they are running the football. And that will sort of hide away his ability that may lie within, as he's not used anywhere near the degree he should be to able to show significant development. So now all the bad stuff is out the way. Now all the explanation's been done. What does he have? So I've had to go and watch the tape for this. I've watched various games. I watched when they played Gardner-Webb. I watched when they played, who was the other ones early in the season? They played North Carolina Central as well. So one of the repercussions of being under pressure so much all the time is he does have sneaky good awareness when he is in the pocket to feel pressure, and he has the escape ability. He's very athletic to avoid the press, extend plays, or scramble, depending on the situation. And as I say, this comes in part from being under pressure a lot of the time because of the offensive line's inability to block for him. So he's almost had to adapt to survive in this respect. So the awareness is actually really good with him. And sort of segueing into this decision-making, it's a very underrated part of his game, the actual decision-making itself. It's surprisingly good how many correct decisions he actually makes, which form part of the appeal about him. The trouble is the decisions are not always followed with effective execution, which kind of affects the fact that he is making the right calls. He's just not executing them in the right way, whether it be the pass, whatever he's doing. It just isn't there, and it just doesn't make a lot of good tape inconsistency. So there's a problem there. The passing itself, yes, the completion rating, very worrying at 59%, but the mechanics are not actually that bad. The way he throws, the ability he has, he's got a big arm and can throw down the field quite far, and the short and intermediate stuff can be good. When he's on song, he can actually throw a really good pass. He's got touch on his throws. He throws a beautiful spiral ball, which I actually can't help but admire. It's just one of those things that you'll always appreciate, but you get really good spiral, good zip on the ball. He can fire it down the field rapidly if he wants to. So you've kind of got the shells inside the shell. You've got all the makings to make a good quarterback in there. And this is where it comes to with him. It's not his college tape that's going to endear him to an NFL team. You've got to strip everything back and see what attributes he has that you can develop at the next level to work out what the potential ceiling may be. So as a running quarterback with dual threat ability, he is competent in that regard. When you do actually see him running the ball, when he does it successfully, he's able to do so. You've just got to work incredibly hard on the ball security. That ball security is just nowhere near where it could be, but it's a coachable trait. We've seen with Jared Goff, we've eliminated his fumble ability in that. Now, it's the same thing, but it is a coachable trait that you can work out with him. And if you sort out that ball security issue, then the running part of his game is going to come on very quick. So you can sort that side out. As a passer, again, as I've said, he has the tools. You've seen fleeting glimpses of most things you would like to see. So as I say, the cannon on the arm, the touch on the ball, the level, all three levels of passing, short, intermediate, long. You can see all this. He does have it in his arsenal, but he doesn't show it often, so you need to help work on the consistency there. He has the instinct, as I've said, in the pocket. He's actually really good in the pocket under pressure, and he has the smarts. He makes a lot of the correct decisions. He's just not effectively executing them. And again, this is all coachable stuff, so it all sounds bad, but when you see what he does have and what you can develop on there, and bearing in mind, you're going to be getting him an undrafted free agency. You're not going to be spending a draft pick on him. You're going to get him in undrafted free agency, so you'll get him for nothing, and you're going to be able to stash him on your squad, and you're going to be able to build him up over time. He's going to need a hell of a lot of refinement and development to get all these areas up to even a backup at NFL standards. So you're investing significant time into him, should he be the guy you want to pick. But that's the same with most day 3 undrafted free agent guys. A lot of them are going to take years to develop here. So whilst on the surface, it just appears like an absolute lost cause with him, having dived down into it, I can see why they might like him. A guy who's going to take a few years to develop. There's no pressure to get him in the team or anything like that. And just maybe, if you can do it right with him, you're going to get a solid, serviceable backup over there in the future. And I believe that he could be. So, yeah, that's everything in terms of Jalen Fowler there from North Carolina A&T. Not the guy you're turning as flashy right away, not like Lindsey Scott, but in the long run, I can see why the Lions are looking at him, and he might come here as an undrafted free agent.
Any thoughts, boys, on Jalen Fowler? Yeah, I didn't think there would be. Let's move swiftly on. I'm going to change the order up just because Ryan has one more guy and I've got 2. So I'm going to kick us off now with Stanford quarterback Tanner McKee. 22 years old. True junior, so coming out quite early compared to some of the guys that we're looking at. 6'6" and 2/10, and every inch of it, 231 pounds. He hasn't run any of the 40-yard, 10-yard split type things, but he's estimated to be a 4.75 guy. His short shuttle was 4.41, so not exactly setting the world alight. And out of high school, he was a 3-star recruit. Because he's a true junior, he's not played in many games, only 23 in his college career. So if you can have a knock on Anthony Richardson for only playing 13, well, Tanner's, he's played almost double, but it's still not very many. 473 of 748 is 63.2%, 5,336 yards, 28 touchdowns, 15 interceptions in his career. This most recent season, much of the same really, 12 games, 62%. 2,947 yards, 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. PFF grade this year, 75.4. So, reasonable year, less than a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio is not exactly fantastic, but there we go. Watched a couple of games of his versus USC and at Oregon, both in 2022. Average games, both of them, 64.2 and 61.2. Strengths for Tanner. He just jumps off the page, like physically gifted. He just is imposing to even look at, to be quite honest. He's that prototypical quarterback that if you look at him, that's how you'd build him to begin with, at least in terms of height and weight. One of the more underrated things that I quite like about him, just to kick us off, is his side steps in the pocket, allowing him time to throw. As I kind of alluded to, he's not exactly the fastest guy in the world, but he's actually quite adept at just taking a step to the left or right to buy himself another half second to deliver a strike. It's going to be the difference between him being able to do some really, really good things in the pros and not. So the fact that he's doing that at a good level already is very nice. Really nice touch on his throwing motion, especially when short. He's going to give his guys a lot of opportunities to catch a lot of balls in the short to intermediate range. Potentially the nicest thrower in that range in the class, I think. I don't want to go too high on him in that short range, but it's really, really nice to look at. Good accuracy in terms of hitting guys in stride. So when we look at quarterbacks and we say, oh, they're completing 62% of their passes or 70% of their passes or whatever, but it's like, okay, but if they're just about catchable but they're behind him, you're killing momentum. Yeah, you might get some catches, but they're not accurate. They're just being caught. Tanner puts it exactly where he needs to, and it means that his guys end up getting a lot of yak, and he's a big part of that. Like, the timing is just very, very nice. When given the opportunity to throw timing deep, he hits it, but only when it's a bullet throw. When he tries to throw that sort of deep arcing throw, he loses a lot of his accuracy. But if he's got that sort of room to just rifle it deep, he can do that. So maybe there's just a little bit of development required when it comes to doing the timing with the loopy throw deep, because he can do it short. So I don't really understand why he can't do it when it requires a little bit more oomph, especially when he can do it when it's a fastball. Gets through his progressions very nicely. You see him go from 1 to 2 to 3 with ease. Like, that's not a problem for him. At Stanford, and I know that I'll have some blowback for this because there's a couple of receivers who've done quite well, but in the games that I saw on tape, his wide receivers did not get much separation. So it relied on him having really good timing to actually get some production, because his guys were just being absolutely blanketed. Like, receivers were not giving him any help. So he was having to do a lot of the work himself. That's not to say he's a playmaker, because I don't think he is, but it relied on him being accurate, and for the most part, he did a good job in that regard. He's an aggressive player too. When it comes to going for one-on-ones on the outside, which we know that Jared Goff cannot do, he's going to take that shot more often than not, and he will put it in a place where only his receiver can go and get it. That's not to say that his receiver will go and get it, because sometimes he's not that accurate when he's doing that sort of throw, but at least he's not having many turnovers when he's going for that ball as well. He's a danger in the sneak game, and at 6'6", you'd hope that he would be, but 3rd and 1, 4th and half a yard, or inches or whatever, he's going to get it 9 times out of 10. He's an absolute weapon in that regard. And, I mean, he's a true junior. He's 22 years old, but there's massive room for growth here. There's that sort of frame that you're looking at. He's got the power to throw deep, but, like I was saying, he just needs to develop a bit there. But the short game is really impressive, and I'm quite bullish on his upside, potentially. He's just not as manoeuvrable as you'd like, but he can still use his physicality to get that 1 yard when you need it, so maybe that's not a massive problem. Weaknesses? I watched him after I saw Will Levis, and when you have a look at Will Levis and what he can do in the rushing game at 6'2.5", or 6'3.5", you then watch Tanner McKee at 6'6", and you think, well, if this guy just does that, he's going to be Will Levis in the rush game plus 20%. But he's not. He doesn't use the rushing game as a weapon as much as you'd like. He's a little slower, and so maybe that's not unexpected. But he could do a bit of zone reads and go crashing down as opposed to trying to go through his line. Like, he could run over some guys, and, I think he put the fear of God in him with how big he is, but he just doesn't use it as a weapon, and he should. Like I said before, he's not a big playmaker. He's not making things happen by himself. He's not working out a structure, so you need him behind a good O-line, which is not ideal. If you're drafting someone nearer the top of the draft, ideally you don't want to have to commit to paying your O-line heavy in order to make him work, and you're going to have to do that with Tanner. He doesn't feel pressure particularly well, especially from his blind side. His internal clock doesn't run, and so because he doesn't have the short speed to escape, he gets hit a lot when he's not looking all the way around the field. Now, he gets through his progressions, but he's zeroed in on what he's doing, and he's not actually thinking, I've been holding the ball 2.5 seconds, and maybe I need to get rid of this now. And so there's multiple examples on tape of taking unnecessary sacks when he could just be throwing the ball over the head of a receiver and getting rid. But I think that's coachable. I don't think that that's going to be something that he is going to plague him altogether. And the offense, I mean, it wasn't exactly pro-ready style offense. It's RPO heavy. And for him not being much of a rushing threat, it's kind of weird that it's operating in that fashion. I know it's a traditional college offense almost at the moment. But I don't think that offense exists, particularly in the NFL, especially with someone of his sort of prototypical height and weight. Like, you don't want him running that offense. And so there's going to be a bit of a learning curve in the NFL. But again, he's young and he's got time to develop. So my projection for him is probably an early 3rd round pick, and means I'm a bit lower on him than the consensus, where he's kind of going in the late 50s and early 60s, which is, some would say pretty high, but he's kind of going in that late 2nd round stage. He's got upside. He's already got some good traits. I can definitely see someone investing a fairly high pick in him. Comp for him might seem slightly unfair. I've got Ryan Tannehill as someone that I kind of see in him a little bit. Now, Tannehill obviously not quite as tall, but Tannehill is an efficient short passer who can operate an offense well. And I mean, that's just what I see in Tanner. Fairly immobile. Tannehill has a bit more to him with his legs, but I think that Tanner could have more to him with his legs if he decided he was going to engage it. So, bit of coaching, someone to kind of take him under his wing and help him out, maybe develop him as a passer and as a runner, I think you could have a really, really good guy who, has QB1 upside. It might take him a little while. I don't think it's going to happen in the first 2 years. But at the same time, I think if he came in relief, he could win a game or two, just because he's got time that I think he's saying he can develop. That's only because he's got a ceiling higher than he is. I mean, if you look at someone who I kind of think could be quite similar in Aidan O'Connell, I think that Tanner's ceiling is much higher than that. And so when you look at the two prospects, it's like, okay, well, Aidan doesn't have a lot more to learn because the ceiling isn't there. But for Tanner, it is. So the fact that I'm saying it's going to take a couple of years for him, don't take that as a knock on his ability to come in relief right now. I think that there's something there, but we just haven't seen it all yet. Boys, thoughts on Tanner McKee?
Complete fraud. I would just say that about him, and this is coming from a guy. I was a massive Davis Mills fan. This is not a knock on Stanford. This is not a knock on the way they play. I just think he's been completely overrated to the point where it wasn't even funny. I mean, you saw at the start of the year, he was getting round 1 looks, round 1 grades. That soon died off because everybody kind of saw what he was, just not an elite guy there really in any way. He's been all right there. He's got some good receivers at Stanford, but that team has been really bad. And Pac-12 has got a lot of really bad teams in there that they've not been able to beat. He's not been able to help get them over the line against many of them. They lost a coach this year. I just don't see the hype there with him. I mean, I don't see there might be developmental upside in there. There could well be, and I think that's what a lot of his appeal is based on, about what he could be, but he didn't really show it me in college. He didn't really show me what I wanted to see, for a guy who gets so much hype with everything and how it goes on. So I just think he's a complete fraud going into this, and I'm not holding up hopes he does much at the next level, and I don't want us to go near him with a 100-foot barge pole. It's just my thing there, and it's a shame because I thought there was a day and age when he could be pretty good. And again, I like my Stanford QBs, but he never took the steps forward I needed to see.
For me, he's the most polarizing QB in the class. I can't sugarcoat it. Stanford Cardinals, they're fucking horrible. Since Kevin Hogan left, they're dog shit, and they've just produced trash football, and their fans are even sick of it. They're in the Pac-12, they're bad, and the Pac-12 is ass. So, and I just look at him and I just think Paxton Lynch, he was the prototypical QB that went too high and then turned out to be terrible. He was great over short range and that. He's got the pro. But the problem is, I think he's not ready. He had to stay in college, but he wouldn't have gained anything because Stanford is so bad. He should have hit the portal. I think he should have spent another year in college. I think he'd have got a good team as well. I think he's declared too early. If the Lions used a second-round pick on him, I'd be absolutely furious because we could get a starter there that I don't think he'll ever be. If they go with the second, third-round pick and they really trust in him, I'll trust Brad. Like I said, I'm not enamored with him. Like I say, he gets sacked. He has some of the same issues with Goff when Goff were running at pressure, not throwing the ball away. We kind of fixed that this year. So maybe if we fix Jared Goff, maybe we can fix Tanner McKee. So maybe he can be a future potential QB backup. Like I said, a lot of things I don't like, but I can also see why people kind of enamored with some of the traits. I think he will go a lot higher than people think he will, a lot higher than I take him. I think that's just a given because of just what he is and what he can offer. But yeah, I wish him all the best. But yeah, everything I've seen just scares me off him. If he becomes a starter this year and does do Davis Mills, I'll gladly eat my words.
It sounds to me like he's going to probably have the Kellen Mond career path, unfortunately, because that's the guy that it sounds like to me. Guy who showed stuff in college, but should have stayed for a year, is taken a bit too high in the second to third round, and then is unfortunately just stuck in a bad place for development. So that's what happened with Monty. Obviously, he was stuck behind Cousins, and then you have Zimmer come out a year after they take him saying, "Oh yeah, he's absolute shite." That's what I'm scared. If he can go to somewhere like Seattle, maybe if they don't take a quarterback early and he's maybe taking the third there to sort of be groomed behind Gino to maybe take over in the future there, that could work. I could see him working out there because Carroll's had history in the past of working well with QBs. He won't have the pressure to come in too early because Gino's quite a good starter. He could work out there, but it has to be the right place. He's one of those that, yeah, it really depends on his place, whether he turns out he's going to crash out and be an XFL quarterback in 2 years, or if he could be a sort of mid-tier QB1 upside. Honestly, it's about the team. And yeah, for me, again, late third round, if we don't take someone, maybe. But maybe if at that range, I'd want someone with a bit more upside who can maybe bring a bit more either with his legs or with his arm.
I do agree with Ryan. He should have stayed. And the thing is, if he goes to a pro-ready system and proves that he can do it there, like you're talking about a mid to higher, round one prospect. Like, he's got the tools. If he went and proved it, he could be doing a lot better than he is. As it is, he's, like you said, he's going to get overdrafted. He's going to underwhelm. And it's going to be tough for him. Like, his absolute ceiling, like, if he hits it, could be like, I don't know, Rufflesberger or something, but like, there's like a less than 1% chance he hits it. There's big bust potential here. There really is. So, yeah, anyway. Ryan, we're coming back to you now for your last guy.
Yep, Tim Demorat. Honestly, I don't know how to pronounce that. I've heard it many times. The QB for the Fordham Rams. This guy, he's got an honest sheet like a bad criminal's rap sheet. It's very long. This guy's got a long list of awards. So 6'4", 220 pounds, 31 4/8, that's a half, 31.5-inch arms, 9.5-inch hands. So his pro day, I don't trust some of these stats, but I found them. 486.40, which, yeah, we'll overlook that. 440 shuttle, 33.5-inch vert, 11'8" broad. That sounds like he should be in the Olympics. So that sounds ridiculous. And a 7.25 3 cone. So this guy to athleticism is like what I am to my hairline. We're growing further apart every day. Like, that's just the way it is. But as a pocket passer, this guy is ridiculous. So let's put this up. Well, 2018 to 2022, 13,461 yards, 123 touchdowns, 39 interceptions. Now, just this year alone, 326 of 499, the 65.3, 4,891 yards, 56 touchdowns in 10 years. He has finished with 1,032 completions, and those passing yards, they had the record for Fordham School and the Patriot League. He's the GOAT of the Patriot League in the FCS. He led them to their first playoff appearance since 2015 this year. Unfortunately, lost 52-42 in the first round to New Hampshire. He threw 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He is back-to-back Patriot Offensive League Player of the Year. He's a 3-time MVP. And we've spoken about Lindsay Scott Jr., who won the Walter Payton Award. This guy's the runner-up. So he was second in FCS as the Offensive Player of the Year. He's phenomenal. He is a pocket passer. So to sum him up, he's a rhythm passer. Everything comes out perfectly on time. He goes through all his reads, his progressions. He's got lovely touch. Short to intermediate range is really good. And if he hits a guy in stride, he's going for a touchdown. So when it's like going as an orchestra, when he's got time in the pocket, it's like Tchaikovsky. When things break down or when he's flushed out the pocket with that 40 speed, I say it's bad. I say he is a pure pocket passer. If he gets flustered or he has to rush, it just totally neutralizes him. I say he went to the Hula Bowl this year and he did throw a 75-yard touchdown to Trey Shropshire, a beautiful score. I believe they lost that game, but this guy is a natural leader. He's got a can of an arm. He has got some of the best stats coming out of FCS in the last decade. He has been incredibly important to the Fordham Rams. I read online like, good luck replacing this guy. Their future, it looks bleak unless they can find a replacement. He is a role model. He's a natural leader. He commands respect of his teammates. He has the offense that is just, it sings, it hums when it works well, and he can knife. Like I said, if everything goes well and he gets time in the pocket, he'll slash through a defense like Freddie Krueger slashing through bed sheets. But if he gets chased out the pocket, or if O-line collapses and he has to run, he's about as effective as this half-naked Toronto girl being chased by Jason Voorhees. It's only going to end one way. So that is kind of like, you get the good from him behind the line. He's big. He's also a prototypical passer at 6'4", 220. I say he's got the touch. He's got everything. But yeah, he doesn't want to run. Like I say, I think he's finished his first 2 collegiate years with like 140 minus rushing yards in each season. He didn't even take many sacks. I just feel like sometimes he runs out of desperation or the last resort and runs into trouble. And like I said, he's a very much a rhythm passer. If he stands in the pocket, will he throw a 60-yard bomb? No. But if he rolls out or if he catches a guy in stride, can he deliver a bomb touchdown? Yes. Because it's all about touch and timing. He just doesn't have the kind of an arm. But if you're looking for a guy that you want to put on your practice squad for 5 years, and he might just be the second coming of Christ, this could be the guy. This guy has got everything you need. He's polished. He's got the accolades that you die for. He's got the stats to back it up. He's also won plenty of games, and he's had the actual success that is required of a QB. So everything on paper, and you watch him, it just looks like he's potentially NFL ready. I say future maybe CFL signal caller. I say could win XFL, USFL title. Very much so. I feel like the sky is the limit with this guy. Prior to UDFA, or he could get picked up mid-season, stashed. Like I say, people probably don't actually know who he is. Like I say, probably need to go and look into him a bit more. But he's an incredibly impressive young man that has had a very successful career. He's got everything to back it up. And he'll live long in the memory book of the Patriot League. Because good luck anyone beating those numbers anytime soon. So I've had lots of fun watching him. Let's say, but athleticism, he is not.
Sometimes when I hear Ryan, I wish I saw the future of what he was about to say, and sometimes I'd call an audible, and I'd not say that. With the half-naked sorority girl being chased by boys. Okay. Guys, thoughts on Tim Demorat?
If his upside is as high as Rise Metaphors, he's the next coming of Tom Brady, a late-round quarterback who can rip it up. Honestly, know nothing about him, so that's about as much as I can say about him. But if he does have that upside, as you say, if you can go in for a couple of years, work on him and get something out of him, hell yeah.
I can't add any more either. Fordham's beyond even my scope.
Me too. So let's move swiftly on for Ash's last guy.
Last and certainly least, unfortunately, it is the signal caller for the Hypnotoads, Max Duggan of TCU. Obviously, got into a national championship this year, but they got there in spite of him, in my opinion. So he had a RAS of 7.11, size poor, 6'1", 207 pounds, 8 7/8 hands. Elite speed with 4.52 40-yard dash with a 1.61 10-yard split, 30.5 vert, and a 9'6" broad jump, which makes explosion good. Agility poor, 4.45 shuttle, 7.28 free cone, not very good. PFF grade this year, 83.0 exactly offense, 77 exactly pass, and then 77.6 running, with 267 completions from 419 attempts, 3,698 yards, 32 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and then 137 rushing attempts, 423 yards, and 9 rushing touchdowns, with 1 reception for 1 yard. I watched Kansas, which is one of his best games this year, of 87.1 offensive grade, where he threw just a shade over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and rushed for 55 yards off 9 attempts and with 1 rushing touchdown. And then I watched the college football semi-final against Michigan, 73.1 offensive grade, 64.7 passing, 72.4 running, with 225 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and then 15 attempts for 57 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Ran a RPO style college offense. So can get the ball out really quickly in the short game and can throw those RPOs and screens really well. And if he trusts a receiver, so obviously this year at BQ, he isn't afraid to throw a 50-50 ball to them. And he has decent arm strength. He can get the ball deep when he wants to. And he can, in the short game, when he's not properly set, he can still throw the ball to any receiver. But he does do so with the old sidearm motion, just consistently. That's all he knows in seemingly in the short game is just that Mahomesian Stafford sidearm, just like motion. When the receiver is clearly open, he can hit them in stride with the deep ball, and he knows how to look off a defender if he knows that route will be open. And when it comes to pressure, he can navigate the pocket and step up to get away from it with his eyes still downfield. And then he's good on naked rollouts, so moving out of the pocket and hitting the receiving stride. He has one of the best ball fakes in the class. This is per Draft Network's little report on him. And he's a massive threat in the run game. He can make a defender miss in space despite his poor agility scores. And he has the long speed to pull away from some guys. He can also make very good reads on read options and can generate a lot of push on QB sneaks. However, he's small. This could lead to some injuries if he keeps up his play style and if he has to play more than just a couple of spot starts a year. And he ran an RPO offense, so barely knows how to read an offense. So you really have to develop that for him. And he stares down his read a lot of times, and it lets the defense know where he's going. So his first interception against Michigan, he makes his read, stares at the receiver, throws it into tight coverage. The ball is deflected up by the corner, and it's caught by the safety further back. Not very good. He lacks touch on his throws as well. He has a bit of the early career Stafford zip in every ball. He just wants to fire it in all the time, and it makes it hard for his receiver to catch, which is shown in his second interception, where he fires the ball into the turkey hole to a receiver who's coming across on a crosser. There's just too much on it. The receiver juggles the ball in the air, and it's caught by a defender. And because of his the system he's played in, he does have difficulty reading defenses, and he throws balls into inceptable places quite a lot, especially when he panics under pressure. So his 3% turnover rate play isn't the best, roughly mid in this class, but it's still an issue for me. The fact he's just firing it in, it's just putting the ball in harm's way too much for me. And his footwork's inconsistent, and that could lead to accuracy issues, which probably contributes to his turnover where he plays. So I have two comparisons for him. One, which is going to be standard one, and one that's a bit more of a Rice style one. So the pro one is Tyler Huntley, good runner, okay passer, can make some bad decisions with the ball, but flashes NFL talent in bursts. The sort of more out there comparison is whoever my QB is on Madden, because all I do is hit that A button, bullet pass it, and just hope for the best. Either I hit the deep ball or I hit a quick slant. There's nothing nice about it. So for me, 12th overall QB, 253rd overall prospect currently on the consensus board. So he's in the 7th round comp pick territory. He's really in that sort of Brock Purdy territory of pick, but Brock Purdy is not. He wouldn't even be a priority UDFA for me, despite the experience he's had and he's got to the biggest stage. There's just too many issues for me to personally be happy spending a pick on him or giving him a lot of money in UDFA. But if he makes it there and he chooses us and it's not too high the contract, there are tools there for the sort of offensive guru, like hive mind of Johnson, Engstrand, Brunel, and Barrett to work with if they want to do something. But you're not going to get a reliable backup out of him for at least 2 years, in my opinion. There are some real issues with sort of his timing and his finesse that needs to be worked on for him to be able to succeed even as an NFL backup right now.
Thoughts on Max Duggan, boys?
See, Max Duggan for me, he's the easiest QB to root for in the whole class. Like I said, I look at him two ways. I said he had a bigger glow up than Graham Potter when he went to Chelsea, and he got the turtleneck and grew the beard. Suddenly, everyone fancy Graham Potter. Like from 2021, Duggan, the turnovers were infuriating. The Horned Frogs just were inconsistent, winning, losing. This year, glowed up. Like I say, the Ginger Prince just he pulled the sword out the stone. Like you say, he had great help from, let's say, D. Mercado, Kendra Miller, but in the passing game, it clicked. He stopped. Right, he turned the ball over a few times, but Like for most of the season, he was at like 3 interceptions, like halfway through the year. That was the best he'd ever done. He kept the ball security to a maximum, which for me was really impressive. Like I say, and I really like the guy. Like I say, he's had rough years where he's been forgotten, he's talked down on. Like I say, his offenses have struggled. A big thing this year, I think, was working with Garrett Riley, Lincoln Riley's brother. I feel like they worked fantastically well together, and he really brought the best out of him. TCU this year, so fun to watch. He commanded an explosive offense. I'd say he got the best out of Quentin Johnson and guys like Darius Davis. Good offensive line, like you say, going to send tackles to draft. I would love for the Lions to land Duggan. I don't know where, but I just feel like there's a lot to teach him. I feel like he's got a lot to learn, something to offer. There's not many guys that go undrafted that have been to the biggest stage. And he could very well do that. That's kind of a rare thing. I look at Duggan, I feel like Stetson Bennett. They're in the same kind of boat, aren't they? It's like a canoe for two. Like I said, they've both been at the biggest stage, but both still just not enamored with them. Like I said, whether it's their size, their play style. But Max seems like a great guy, a leader. He's really gone from, like say, through the turmoil, and he's come out of it smelling of roses. So I really hope Max does do well at the next level. And if he could be a bad QB1, that's not a bad thing. I say if he can be a consistent, put him in, gives you a chance to win, or a really great guy that comes in relief, finishes a job, or can step in if a QB goes down and win a few games for you, it wouldn't surprise me. I've seen more than enough to know he can do it. Can he do it at the next level? I'm going to find out, but I am rooting for the kid.
I mean, yeah, Ryan mentioned him then, another quarterback, Stetson Bennett. Stetson Bennett is incredibly disrespected at the collegiate level by a lot of people. Max Duggan is also incredibly disrespected by people at collegiate level. People who say that TCU side got to the playoffs in spite of him are completely wrong. They got there because of him. He was a big part of how the offense played and how the offense worked. And as Ryan's already very well mentioned, his improvement as a quarterback from last year, even just last year to this year, has been phenomenal. I mean, Ryan described him as a run-first quarterback. That's all he was. And it was. He liked to run a lot of the time. He didn't like to pass the ball. This year, it was a lot more controlled. He grew so much as a passer. He was a lot more disciplined. He didn't just go off running all the time. He put the passing aspect of his game first, which is why he did so well. And yes, he had a good offense around him, but he elevated that offense with how he played. He's a running threat quarterback, so that allows lanes for DeMarcado and Miller to open up. With Quentin Johnston, he's maybe got him to the point where he's going to be wide receiver 1 in this draft because of how well those two have worked together. And moving on from that, they wouldn't have even been in those playoffs without him. I think back to several games. I think back to the Baylor game where they had to kick the walk-off field goal to win it with no timeouts, nothing left. They don't get there without Duggan getting them down the field to that point in the first place. Oklahoma State went to overtime. That, again, Duggan, difference maker when it comes to that. From where he was a year ago to getting them all the way to the Natty final. And it's not like TCU had a good defense he was riding the coattails of, like is what's aimed against Stetson Bennett. That TCU defense is awful. It only really came to play when they played against Michigan, and even then they gave up a boatload of points. So there's been a lot of pressure on his shoulders. And towards the end of the season, when playoff talk became a thing, it was like, oh, yeah, they're going to buckle. They're going to lose a game. They're going to lose one of these. And yes, they lost the final. They lost the Big 12 championship game. Happened, but they still made the playoffs, still got the big win there. And he's a big part of that. And I think he should get an opportunity at this level. He's shown tremendous growth this year. He has presided over one of the Cinderella stories in college football. And I think that he should get an opportunity at the next level. He ain't going to start right away. He's not going to be a superstar straight off the bat. Like Ryan said, he could be, even if it's like a low-level tier quarterback 1 over time, but the potential is there because he's got it on the ground and he showed this year that he's got it in his arm. If the system's right, then he's allowed to flourish. So, I hope he ends up somewhere that treats him right and he gets a good opportunity because he has earned it.
Ryan described Tanner McKee as the most polarizing quarterback in the class? Well, I would say that he's the most polarizing day 2 quarterback in the class. Max Duggan is definitely the most polarizing best of the rest quarterback in the class for sure. It's easy to see why people like him and why people don't like him. It's just so much evidence of both things out there. He is, for me, the grittiest quarterback in the class, bar none. Like, I think his best trait is that he can forget his errors very quickly. That's a very easy to project trait. You know, he'll throw a bad pass, he'll miss an open throw, he'll throw a pick, and he'll come back right on the next play and just carry on. Like, his fortitude and ability to bounce back is elite. Having said that, he's the reason why TCU had to come back so many times. Like, he put his teams in bad positions and then brought them back to win. And you can say, well, at least he brought them back to win. And it's like, yeah, sure, but that's fine in college. But if you want to project that to the next level, I'm going to tell you that those bad things are going to translate and the good might not. Like, I fear for any team that takes him that you're going to get someone who... You might get David Blau. Like, I really think that Blau is a reasonable comp for him, unfortunately. Super likeable guy who's got a bit of mobility. There's a bit of something there with a pass. Everyone remembers Blau's 75-yard bomb to Kenny Golladay to kick off his Lions career. And it's like, yeah, I could see Duggan do that. But inaccurate thrower, for me, he's not got a feel for the quarterback position. I don't see it. Like, he's got grit, he's got determination, he's a leader of men, and he's super impressive in that respect. But even though he has clearly improved year to year, I don't see him as anything more than a 7th round pick. And I think that might be rich for him. And I don't see him making it as a high-end quarterback too. I don't see that in his ceiling. It's just, he's physically limited. He's not fast enough that his running threat in college is going to translate to the NFL level. Like, the elite of the elite in terms of defensive ends and defensive tackles are going to eat him up at the next level, and that running threat is not going to translate. And then when you put it on his arm, I don't think that's got enough either. And I don't see it improving. So I love him as a college quarterback. I think it's great, but as an NFL guy, I don't see it.
So what do you mean when you say he puts his team in bad situations? He throws 4 picks through the first 13 weeks on a team that gives up 40 regularly against most teams. How's he putting his team in bad positions? I'm just curious.
So, generally speaking, I think that he is not an accurate quarterback in terms of putting it on time in front of his receivers in order that the yak is coming because of what he's doing. I think that when I watched the running backs do it, I thought the running backs put him in good situations, and I thought that Quentin Johnson was the one who was taking the ball and running with it himself rather than Duggan being the reason why that was happening. But also, I just saw too many times where they'd just go 3 and out in big spots. Like, I think that I've seen situations where the pass was there for the taking and he didn't make it. And it's not in terms of picks or anything like that. It's just, I thought that they punted too often. You know, like, I'm thinking, actually, a quarterback that has your arm and the skills that I just want you to have, he doesn't have it. I don't know, like, the picks aren't there, you're right, but then in the Michigan game, where you know you're going to have to outscore Michigan and it's a terrific defense, but then he, maybe feeling the pressure, took some really unnecessary risks when TCU were in a great spot. Like, they were away and they were beating Michigan, and he brought Michigan back into that game by himself. Like, yes, early on he minimized his interceptions, but through his career it's been an issue, and then later on he reverted to type. Anyway. Joey, yeah, I know, you don't like me now. You're not going to like me when I go on to my last guy, but we're going to go with your one first.
Well, I got one left. Oh, I have, haven't I? Yeah. Yeah, speaking of disrespected quarterbacks, I ended up with Stetson Bennett, the quarterback of the Georgia Bulldogs. Everybody knows who Stetson is after doing two guys who nobody knows about. I thought I'd do one that people do. So 5'11", 192 pounds, two times national championship winning quarterback back to back. His last two seasons, he's gone for 7,000 passing yards, or just like 40 yards under, but 7,000 passing yards, 56 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, and throwing in the mid-60s for his completion percentage. So, yeah, I talked about disrespected quarterbacks. Stetson Bennett has a claim to be probably the most disrespected quarterback in college football. There was this narrative that formed around him that he was a passenger on an elite team who only has to do a serviceable job to get success. And for me, that is completely unwarranted. This Georgia side had not won a natty since 1980, 9 years before I was born, 40-odd years ago. And before Bennett was starter, now they've got two in 2 years. They said he was carried by his defense in his first year. Well, he kind of showed them wrong because the amount of talent they lost last year, he was still able to win them games when they started giving up more points this season. They said his offense could not play from behind because he can't get out of his safe zone and make the bigger impact plays. You only have to go and watch the game against Ohio State to show again they were wrong twice. They were in double-digit deficits against that team, and they are the definition of an explosive offense. And every time a question was asked of him, he answered. And for me, this is why Bennett is probably the most. We've not mentioned Campbell today, but I think he's the most Dan Campbell type of quarterback in this draft. And I say that because he plays with pure heart and grit and determination. Where he's come from, he was a JUCO guy. He was a walk-on guy to start off. So to go to such a reputable SEC school like Georgia as a walk-on, you are fighting against genuine five-star, high-level quarterback recruits to even just get a sniff of the field. To go through that, to earn the trust of Kirby Smart, his head coach, to then get his opportunity when JT Daniels went down with an injury 2 years ago, which was one of college football's biggest tragedies with JT Daniels. But to not only get there, then not only take that starting spot, but put it in a cast iron grip that he never gave up on his way to winning 2 national titles is the pinnacle of an underdog story. This is a guy who got his shot, who in 99.9% of other cases would not have, and he gave 1,000% to make sure that he took that shot. He was recruited as a pro-style quarterback, and they do, for the most part, play a pro-style offense there, but he has somehow developed an unlikely ability at his size, obviously below 6 foot, below 200 pounds, to scramble effectively and be a weapon in the ground game for Georgia as well. He tallied up 10 rushing touchdowns for them in 2022. So he's not just sort of defined to being that pocket passer who will just stay in there and do all his work with his arm. He's sort of developed a niche in the run game you can use as well. So Georgia, they run the read option with him. They take advantage of his sort of really quick processing skills, but he runs his offense with great effect and with great efficiency. As a passer, he's extremely efficient is probably the best way to describe him. The turnover-worthy play rate is just 2.4%. Don't believe, I think there might be 1 or 2 guys in the NFL who had less of a rate of that this season. He's very careful with the ball, and he can be because, again, you go back to the processing skills, you go back to the touch on his passes. They're always where he exactly wants them to be. And, he's very good at just finding the gaps, working out the coverage, putting the ball where he's not going to turn it over. And you can see in Scott's career, he doesn't turn it over very often. I think last year, 7 interceptions to 27 touchdowns. So that's quite a healthy rate there. And 4 of those came in 2 games against Florida and Miss State. And a couple of those were down to receiver error, not really himself per se. And like I say, as a runner, he doesn't really have the frame to be able to. I don't know if he'll be able to carry this on at the NFL level, but he seems to have found a niche on certain specifically designed plays where he's just able to hit gaps, get yardage, and he's as tough as they come. I say his story is one of grit and determination. He himself is a guy who is incredibly tough, and he will take on much bigger guys. He will try and truck through them, get those extra yards. He really does lead from the front. And he's got sneaky speed to him. He ran a 4.65, I think it was, at the combine, which was a lot quicker than anyone thought he was. And you're kind of like, yeah, I can kind of see that on the field as well at this point. So, I really like the way he plays. I know people will say that the offense is limited, that he doesn't need to be at his best to do it, but he does everything he needs to do really well and to a high level. And I think a bit better than he's given credit for. Now, in terms of the negatives, again, this is another one with age. He is 24. I think he's going to be 25 either before the season or certainly during the season. And then you've got the size and durability thing. So he's 5'11", 192. If you're going to be a quarterback of that size, not unlike Lindsey Scott Jr., to be fair, you've kind of got to have elite athleticism to go with it to make success there. And like I say, he can run a good 4.40, but the athletic side is not really there to him. He's not a guy who's going to just outright burn you with speed, who doesn't have the elite sort of movement skills to force missed tackles, all that sort. So it's kind of going to be a very niche fit for him at the next level, but I do believe he can. He got a lot of tap after the season was done. Obviously, he declined to go to the Senior Bowl. People said he was been a bit of an arse when everything was said and done after the Natty, but he came back, he did his testing, he did very well, and I'm going to be interested to see where he goes. This is going to be a very interesting case. Obviously, the guy's just coming off back-to-back Natties. It's only happened once with AJ McCarron, and I'm not going to be lazy and use that comp for him, but his career could well go in that same sort of trajectory. But I think there's a home for Stetson Bennett at the next level. Is it going to be as a quarterback one? Probably not. But if you want a guy who's going to come in as a quarterback two, who has the right attitude, who is going to work harder than anybody else in the room to keep improving, and if you want a guy who you want to be reliable and dependent to come in as your backup quarterback at the next level, to run a pro-style offense and to be able to steady the ship, nothing crazy. If he's got a good run game in there with him, if he's got some good receivers to work with, I think he's going to be able to carve out a niche at the next level. And I would at least like to see him get a go, because everyone who's naysayed and doubted on him, every time they have, he's proven them wrong. So I would like to believe that he can do it at the next level as well and make the step up to the NFL and carve a future out for himself. So very efficient, sneaky good run ability there, but the size and the athletic ability and that are going to be a big question. So he's going to need to find a very specific home at the next level. It won't be us, I don't think. I think the right team could really do something with him.
Stetson Bennett, boys.
For me, Stetson Bennett, he's the perfect storm. I say that because he is a real-life Kurt Warner or Radcliffe Cinderella story. How many people walk on at the best schools in the nation and end up starting? It's not many, I'll tell you that. When he's competing with 4 and 5 stars every week and he wins that job. Like I say, he was blessed, like I say, obviously because he's landed, like I say, obviously he's won a job at a school that can give him anything he wants. Resources wise, like I say, best pair of tight ends, best trio of tight ends, all the receivers. He has had a plethora of talent. But just because you've got the fancy car around you, don't mean you can drive it. Don't mean you're a good driver. Like I say, he has been able to steer and guide that offense and lead it to back-to-back title games. Pretty much decimated his way through everyone that were put in him. Anyone that got put in his way basically got stomped on, and he did it with a swagger. He did it with a little bit of an arrogance, a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. They're traits I like about him. Like I say, he feels disrespected. He plays like it. I'll tell you what, if he was the same size as Will Levis, I reckon people talk about him like Trevor Lawrence. People will say he's a generational talent because he's a little bit undersized and because he's not the same age as CJ Stroud. People just want to bash him before he's even got there. They're like, he'll never get a chance. I say, he's too small. He can't do this up at the next level. He can't keep this up. He's coming from a school that's got boosters coming out of its ass. But I think he could. I think he could have won at a school that had lesser resources, lesser talent. I say, I still think he could have made the most and maximised what he'd got where he'd landed. He just happened to land at a powerhouse, and it was the perfect storm. I say, it just worked. Everything. He worked his way up. He bided his time. He got fortunate when his starting gig actually happened because it was someone else's unfortunate demise, but they never looked back. Kirby Smart, give him the job, like I say, and once he stranglehold the job, never look back. Like I say, he could be the perfect NFL Cinderella story. He could be the guy that comes in, and the next time a guy gets injured, I think that will probably be the first time he starts, maybe of injury. He could win the job, and he never gets back. A bit like Brock Purdy might have won the job, and like I say, Trey Lance never starts again. That could be very much the way Stetson Bennett finds his roots starting in the NFL. The QB3, when everyone falls, the dominoes fall around him, he comes in and he says, "This is my team now. You two can piss off." Like I say, I'm taking the keys now. And yeah, I love the chip on his shoulder. I think he'll keep the same attitude in the NFL. Like I say, I've made everything from nothing, and I can do it here, and I'll beat who I have to get the job. Like I say, he seems like a dreams coach.
My only thing with him is obviously the kind of, and just about mentioned it, but the whole thing around the Senior Bowl, they declined that, and the East West Shrine Bowl, and then was found publicly intoxicated in Dallas, banging on people's doors. That's the only thing. I know Dan said before when he was referencing the time in Miami where there was a guy who had alcohol problems, but as soon as he steps onto the field, he didn't care as long as he played. I don't know about, like, other than everything else, I'm fine with. It's just that whole thing of off the field, can he keep it together? Because reading reports like, oh yeah, I have a friend in the area. When they asked him, oh yeah, what's his name? I don't know. What's his address? I don't know. What's his number? I don't have a cell phone. It was taking him because he was a problem to himself. He could have got himself mugged, beaten up, anything. So it's the off-field stuff, and it's sad because it's two Georgia people who we could get connected with. Obviously, the other being Carter, who it's the off-field stuff that's a major thing, and it's just until we obviously that's the one thing we can't know everything about because it's the one thing we don't have access to. We don't have access to the interviews and that until after the fact when Lions put out the Inside the Den and we get to watch it. We won't know, and that's the unfortunate thing.
Yeah, I think that's a key thing for me as well, Stetson Bennett in the interviews, because that's going to make or break him for me, because I echo Ant and Ryan's sentiments. I absolutely love him as a prospect. He is one of the most pro-ready quarterbacks in this class. Like, he can read defenses really well, he can make all the throws, he does it without making a fuss about the skills that he's showing, but he's got the swagger of Joe Burrow. Like, he's a baller, and he damn well shows it every time he goes on the field. Like, there's a little bit of Brady to him. Like, I'm not saying he's going to be Brady, that's a ridiculous thing to say, but low-round prospect with pro-ready skills that can deliver all the passes. Like, it's the platform you need to go that route, and he could do it. Like, he could. I believe in him big time. Like, if he holds himself together off the field, and that is the concern, you're right, Ash. Like, he could blow it up, but I want him. I want him at the Lions. He could run the Goff offense, and it wouldn't miss a beat.
Let's hope there's no Johnny Manziel in him. I think that's what Ash is saying.
Yeah.
He could very
that's
well
pretty much,
Johnny Manziel. If he gets too big for his boots, someone's got to rein him in.
Yeah. All right, last one that we're profiling in depth, and then we might mention some of the others in passing. It's mine, and it's Will Levis, a quarterback from Kentucky. Spent 3 years at Penn State as a backup to Sean Clifford. 23 years old, redshirt senior, ended up transferring to Kentucky and started there for 2 seasons. 2 seasons? 3 seasons. I can't count. 6'3" and 7/10. 229 pounds, estimated 40-yard dash time 4.72, 3-star recruit out of high school. In his career, played in 38 games, 479 completions on 738 attempts, 5,876 yards, 46 touchdowns, 25 interceptions, so less than a 2-to-1 ratio touchdowns to interceptions, not the best ratio there in terms of his college game. 2022, 11 games, 185 of 283, 2,406 yards, 19 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, so again below 2-to-1. PFF grade of 68.6, but he did show a 91 grade in 2021, so some big regression there, and there's some big reasons why that happened. Come on to that later. Watched 2 games of his. Thought it would be a great thing, considering he was so highly rated in this game, to watch the Georgia game from 2021. Had a PFF grade of 83.3, and then in the most recent season against Ole Miss, where he had a PFF grade of 64.7. Strengths, and it's the one you always hear about him, and it's that he's got a big arm. And it's something which, for me, I saw, but I've read that other people do not agree with this, so maybe you take it with a pinch of salt. I think it takes him a little while to dial up his big arm when he goes deep. Now, you'll hear that he potentially has one of the most crisp releases in the game. I think that that's in relation to his short passing, and when it comes to the short passing, I completely agree. Quick release, pretty release, that is also another one of his strengths. But when it comes to having the big arm, I see him winding it up a little bit, which is not something I particularly like. But it is definitely a big arm, the biggest in the class. He can throw it an absolute mile, 70, 75 yards is perfectly within his range. Quite a mobile quarterback, despite the lack of speed. He uses it as a threat. It is not something that he does straight away, but he does have designed runs, and he does enjoy running over people. Like, it's a big facet of his game. And Kentucky love to sneak the ball on 3rd and short. It's what they do, and he does it very, very well. That O-line gave him a little bit of room, but he's the one bundling over, and he's probably the best person in the class when it comes to 3rd and short. Good vision, generally speaking. He's able to thread the needle with power. So, if there's even a small window, he's able to absolutely rifle it. It kind of goes in with having a big arm. It's maybe the same positive, but there we go. And he's been part of the Shanahan and McVay style offenses. So wide zone, play action passing type offenses. And that kind of dictates a short passing game. If you know anything about the Shanahan tree, it is predicated on that sort of style. And he's decisive in that sort of offense. But it isn't exactly one that's asking him to do a lot. In any of his college career, really, you will see a modicum of wide receiver screens, little dump offs to running backs, slants, simple offenses that we've seen, Brock Purdy execute perfectly. And you have a look at the other kind of San Francisco quarterbacks that they've had as backups in the last few years operate this sort of offense with ease. So it's a quarterback friendly offense, and it really hurts his evaluation because you just don't know whether he can actually run a proper NFL offense. You haven't seen him do it yet. It's not to say that he can't, but for someone as highly regarded as he is, it gives me pause. Can he run a pro-style offense? And Shanahan and McVay's offenses are pro-style offenses. Yes, I can hear you say that back to me. And of course the league run it as well. It's not like it's not widely done. But therefore it makes his landing spot incredibly important, because if they run a different style of offense, I have my doubts that he'll be able to run it effectively, and I'll come on to the weaknesses now. Accuracy in anything other than short passing situations is dire. Like, bad. And even then, sometimes in the short passing game, the accuracy normally is fine, but he'll have the odd ball that just gets away from him. The ball will wobble really badly. He doesn't find the laces particularly well on the football. And then when he tries to throw the spiral, you'll see it in the air. Sometimes it might even go end over end on short passes. It's bad. Like, his technique is poor, despite the release being crisp. So when he grips the laces, the short passing game is good, and he's an accurate quarterback. But it's so frustrating to see, because he's got this talent and this arm, and then it just goes to pot. It's frustrating. And his footwork as well needs some work. He often is not throwing with a stable base. There's little shuffles in there that are just completely unnecessary. He needs to tighten that up. I said before, he needs to wind up on the deep ball. It means it takes a while for him to actually get it out for that, which puts him at risk. I said about the accuracy being a problem. I saw in the 2 games I watched maybe 10 attempts at this deep ball. Like, he goes for it often because he should. It's one of his strengths, that big arm. But sometimes he's missing it by 5 to 10 yards. Like, it's not airballing it and it's going over his head by like an arm or something. Like, he's missing it by a long way. And it says to me that it's someone who knows what he's meant to do, but doesn't feel it. Like, it's not... muscle memory isn't there. He's just kind of chucking it. And it's frustrating to watch for someone who's got that gap. So in the 2 games that I watched, he had 3 separate occasions where he dropped the ball. One was on a sneak, one was in shotgun, it was a perfectly fine snap ball, and he's just not fielding it. He's anticipating trying to find his receivers too soon and not focusing on catching the bloody ball. And that's fixable, that's fine. But when you bring it in with everything else that I'm talking about here, it's just another weakness to add to the list of things. So, deadly quarterback in the run. Loves to run, loves to truck people. He's got a high floor because he can just do that and he'll be absolutely fine. And because of how he uses his stocky nature, because he's a built lad for 6'3.5", he's going to be a threat. And then with that big arm, if it clicks for him, he's going to be a threat down the field. He's going to threaten you wherever you are. You're going to have to cover all 100 yards because he can throw at 75. But the guy has no feel for being a quarterback. Like, I'm not convinced he is a quarterback. It's frustrating, but like, when you've been playing as long as he has, he's 23 years old. He'll be 24 when he starts playing if he plays year 1. He's not a young guy. He's not 21 or 22. Find the laces. Like, you're a quarterback. When it comes to throwing people open, throw a catchable ball sometimes. Put some touch on it, but there is no touch whatsoever. And so when it comes to upside, there's upside. And there's growth to be had. He's got the tools. He's got the physical nature to him. And he's got a high floor. But I don't see a world in which he succeeds. There's so much to fix. There's so many problems that I cannot in good conscience call him a player that I would want anywhere near my team. And it's so... I was so excited to watch him because you heard all about this sort of dual threat quarterback who's going to be a threat with his legs. He's got the cannon arm. You heard the Stafford comps. I'm like, I want to like this guy. And I came away gutted from watching him, even just from the 2 games. It was shockingly bad. And I think I have him QB8, QB7. He's I think he's an early day 3 guy. I wanted to say he was going to be a mid-3rd round pick, but he's not. He's a 4th rounder, maybe. There's massive upside potential, but you're risking your franchise with him. And to think he might go 4th overall or higher is shocking. A GM will get fired for doing it early because he'll bust. You need to give him time to learn how to be a pro quarterback. I might have gone in a bit hard, and I'm sorry, but I got angry watching him. And I'm anticipating some blowback from being too strong, so yeah. Any thoughts, boys?
I'm just going to sit here and watch the fireworks.
Name me a Kentucky wide receiver. Name me a Kentucky tight end.
Will Levis.
See, what you say about him is very true. I mean, I was ready. You know, he was the guy I wanted to draft more than anybody this time last year because where he was at, he'd had a damn good year. He was really good, and I'm thinking that this is Stafford 2.0. This is a guy who is built strong and he's made of iron, and he's going to absolutely, you know, his grit and determination is going to see him through. It didn't happen. And as the season wore on, it was like I saw game after game after game. I remember the Vandy game. He couldn't even close that out. They lost to Vandy. And it was like, come on, if you're going to be a top pick for us, then you've got to show more than this. However, And I can't believe I'm having to defend him here because the criticism about him has got worse and worse and worse. It went from he's not a top quarterback anymore, like top 2 in the draft, which is legit. That's fine. I can get on board with that. Then it went to he's just a traits guy. You know, there's nothing to like about it. You know, he's just a traits guy, but he's still going to be a top 5 guy. He's going to get better on the traits. I can kind of get behind that. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Then it was he's not going to see round 1. He's going to be there in day 2. No one's going to like him because of, you know, there's just nothing there to like. And then it's like, no, Trey Lance got picked 3rd not that long ago, and that was based completely on traits. Just because he can run a little bit, he doesn't have anywhere near the traits that Will Levis has in areas that actually matter. He still went 3rd, so come on, let's pack it in with that. And then I hear he's going to be a tight end at the next level. He might not even be a quarterback. And I'm just like, come on. This is what happens when a player starts going down in people's estimations and everyone starts jumping on his back, then everyone's looking for the next hot take because if they're right, they look like a genius. And if not, we forget about it in a year and it doesn't happen. And it's like we're losing sight of what he is. He is a guy who is a lot of polish to go on yet. And yes, he is a development guy who isn't really going to start for you right away. But he has every single tool you need to be a good quarterback. Every single one. And we're talking about taking guys day 2 or 3 who potentially might have these skills of that. He has them. You've just got to find a way to utilize them properly. You're going to have to give him time to develop properly. I mean, one of his big issues, he just loves to throw it hard all the time. When you start taking a little bit of the viz off, you know, you don't have to beat everyone with your cannon arm every play. Sometimes it takes some pizzazz, a little bit of niche, a little bit of finesse. You can teach that, but you're still going to hit the ones downfield. You're going to get all this. So when it starts going to the point where he might not even play quarterback, I just think that's ridiculous because he's got everything you need there. And we're taking into account, I've just shown you there, no one can name a wide receiver from there. No one can name a tight end from there. The running back you can name, Chris Rodriguez, but guess what? He was banned for a big portion of the season because he's been a naughty boy in the offseason. Didn't even have him in that team this year. There are no weapons around him, no substantially good weapons for him to aim at. We've just been talking about Stetson and his arsenal and everyone he's got. Will Levis had nothing at Kentucky, really, in the way of elite guys who make it easy for him to do it. It's a bunch of randos around there outside of Chris Rodriguez. That in one presents problems for him to look at his best as well. It's not just about the quarterback making his players around him look good. He needs good playmakers so that he can operate and look good as well. He can't do that. You've also missed out the point that he's been sacked 60 times in the last 2 seasons. 60. The guy has taken an absolute pasting because his offensive line, strangely for Kentucky, has been absolute cheeks these last 2 years. They're usually a hotbed of good NFL talent when it comes to their offensive linemen, and it's been terrible. The amount of games you've seen him wailed and get beaten up on, hits time after time after time after time after time, and that affects a quarterback's play. And when I look at games when he's not performing well, it's quite clear he's shook up, he's taken all these hits and that, and you can't ask a quarterback to play in a system where he's been sacked 60 times in 2 years with no playmakers around him because his only good one is suspended, and then be like, oh yeah, he's regressed, he looks terrible, he's really bad. I mean, yes, there is fault on his side. I, for one, as a big fan of him, have not been impressed with him this season and think that he should have made more steps as a quarterback. But one, you still can't deny the talent he has. And two, it's not all on him. That team is dire, really dire. You telling me you can't beat Vandy? That's on the defense as well as the offense. That is what he's working with there. And I think in part that has led to some of this perceived criticism of him. And it's like, right, yeah, screw it. Let's get on this one quarterback. Let's drag him down. Let's do anything we can with them. You see it with players in the draft cycle. Someone goes on a downslope and everybody jumps on him. And I feel like Levis is this with quarterbacks here. Yes, he could have done better, but he was not put in a position to succeed at Kentucky. And that has really hindered him. And when you strip everything away, you strip that college career away, you look at him as a player and what he can be at the next level, he has everything you want. everything you want to be able to go, right, we're going to develop him and we're going to make a monster out of him. He can still be that guy. So when I hear things like, he's not a quarterback, he's not round one, it's like, just stop it. Stop it, please.
Ash?
I have 2 points. The first one is, yeah, I agree that he hasn't had the best surrounding cast, but didn't we say with Aiden O'Connor earlier that he was able to bring people up? Surely Levis could do that with people like Josh Catus, the tight end, or Baron Brown, the wide receiver, both of whom graded higher than him on PFF, by the way. So it's not like he was working with complete and utter idiots. Yes, he's in one of the hardest leagues in the SEC, facing very good defenses, but it's true he regressed this year. And also, we've heard it with the Toolsy guys who supposedly have everything. Yes, they can turn out and be like a Josh Allen who has the tools but didn't show it in college at Wyoming. But they can just as easily be a Sam Darnold or a Drew Lock, both of whom got drafted maybe a bit too high based on the tools and got their GMs fired. John Elway is now not in the Broncos because he messed up with the Drew Lock pick. The guy who drafted Sam Darnold for the Jets, neither the head coach or the GM are there anymore. And even today, one of the pro days or something, the John Lynch, the San Francisco GM, said Purdy's the starter and he's the definite starter no matter what. They wasted a lot of capital trading up to get Lance. So yeah, I agree he's got the tools. He could work out, but for me, it's too much of a risk even at round one or maybe even round two because I've seen it fail so many times now. There is the Josh Allen's where it could work out, but it's so little of a hit rate for me that I'm scared off from getting in round one, round two, because the ability to come back and bite us and then set the franchise back a couple of years. It's just we're in the position we're in now. I'm too scared to risk that. If we do take him, I can get behind him, of course. Like I will try and look into the tools and that. But just for me, watching the tiny bit I have in that, it's just I'm more with Matt than I am with you, Ant, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Just to
I never said I wanted us to draft him, so I don't know how
I know.
that's kind of part of the conversation.
No, it's not. I know it's not. I'm just saying, like,
yeah, just to reply to Ant's point on about grading, I think he'll be a round one pick. I think he'll go in the top 10. People do bet on traits. I 100% agree with you in terms of where he might go. Like, he's got, I said he's got the weapons, and people bet on traits. So he's going to be a round one pick, 100%. But where I grade him, where I think he should go, based on what I think he's going to do at the next level, is a separate issue. Like, I think he is a day 3 pick. Like, when it comes to if you plotted a graph of like potential in terms of probability, the top 5 quarterback in the NFL probability exists for him. That is on the graph. Like, because of the tools, it's possible he gets there. And I can't say it isn't. But I think his bust rate's very high because of the lack of polish that he's shown. And when it comes to other quarterbacks with traits, we'll come on to Anthony Richardson in a minute. I feel like quarterbacks with traits should have a good feel for the game. And that's what I fear about Levis the most. It's not finding the laces. It's not feeling the pressure of edge rusher coming to hit him from his blind side. It's not any of the stuff that I listed. It's that when I watch him throw a ball, I kind of feel like he's improvising it. Like he's kind of making it up a bit. There's just something about him and watching it, the way that he throws, the way that he's reading the game, that makes me think that he's not feeling it. It's that sort of intangible nature of things, as opposed to anything else I said. You can throw all of that away. And that's why I question whether he's a quarterback. Is because I can see the wheels turning in his head, and he's not... It's like 2 + 2 = 5. 2 + 2 = 5. And he can't work out the answer or something. It's like he's trying to work out an equation in his head. I know that's making it really simple, but it's like he's trying to find the answer to an equation. He can't get it. That's what I see in him as a quarterback. Like I said, the probability is there that he might make it, and if he does, he's going to be a home run. This is the definition of swinging for the fences, because it might happen, but I just think it's a low chance, especially given his age as well. Like, he's been around a while, and older quarterbacks, and we'll come onto this with Hooker, it's not that older quarterbacks can't develop, and it's not about how long you have them under contract, because you definitely have them for 5 years, and they'll be 29, 30. That's coming into quarterbacks' prime. It ain't about that. It's that younger guys tend to make bigger leaps in their development. They learn faster. They take on direction more easily, and they haven't learned bad habits over a long period of time. That's why younger guys are better regarded when it comes to development. It ain't about the age. You see 35-year-old quarterbacks do really well. And if that is the end of a second contract, that's fine. Like, who cares? Like, you're a long way down the road by then. So age isn't bad in itself. It's more younger guys learn faster on average. So I'm really not trying to be unfair to him. I'm disappointed. That's it for me. I'm disappointed. And I'm not trying to stick the knife in or be reactionary. I have never been one of those guys thinking he's a day one guy anyway. It's not like I'm trying to pile on him with everyone else. Like, I'm only grading him on what I've seen. I'm not trying to be down on him just because everyone else is, if you know what I mean.
You're entitled to your opinion, like always.
Yeah, that's fair. Right. There are 4 notable quarterbacks that we haven't actually talked about today so far, and I just thought it would be a good thing just to mention them in passing. 2 that we should have no chance of drafting, and 2 that we might, but 1 probably not. CJ Stroud, folks from Ohio State, obviously had a great year. The presumptive number 1 overall pick at the moment. Just a few thoughts on his profile coming into this draft?
He will be the good QB for the Panthers in that he'll be nice and stable for them. They've had a bit of volatility there the past couple of years, and he's the kind of quarterback that Reich likes to work with as well. So it could definitely work out for him. He could be a really good quarterback. Still not my QB1 though, unfortunately.
Who are we on about here?
Stroud.
Yeah, Stroud's still got a lot to prove. He needs to prove that he can work without a wide receiver 1 full core. Really, that's the big problem I've always had with him. I mean, last year you've got Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Marvin Harrison, and Jackson Smith-Njigba, all who are very high round 1 draft picks. And I think this is where the whole Ohio State quarterback thing comes into play. They recruit so damn good their weapons for their quarterbacks that it kind of, when they get to the top level, and I mean, who've they got in Carolina now that Moore's gone? I mean, it's
DJ Chark, Terrence Marshall, Shai Smith, and then Tommy Tremble's their tight end.
I would argue that Ohio State have a better wide receiver core this year than them. And I would. They've probably had a better wide receiver core than quite a few teams. All those players will walk into the Bears lineup. So how is he going to come to the next level now that he's not going to have the creme de la creme to work with? He's going to be on a bad team where he's going to be under a bit more pressure. I think he'll be good. I do. I think he'll get there eventually. I think he will take longer to adapt to the league than people think, because of the downgrading quality that's going to be around him coming up to the NFL level. But I mean, if it's the Panthers, they're building well, they're probably going to draft well. So I'd say in a year or 2, he could be a very dangerous weapon. And it depends where he goes. I'm with Ash. He's not quarterback 1 in this draft. He's not even close to being quarterback 1 in this draft. People just remember all the snazzy throws, the long throws, but he's doing that because he's got 4 wide receiver 1s on that team who get so much separation that it's hard to miss them. So, Bryce hasn't had that. So I think CJ's going to be good at the next level, but I think it's going to take time, and I think people are going to be unpleasantly surprised to start with whilst he adjusts to it.
I think the top quarterbacks, I do buy into the highest floor argument. I think that in terms of traits, in terms of arm talent, he's one of the more pro-ready guys right now. You're right about the wide receiver core. It's exceptional, and it makes his evaluation so difficult. I do think the one thing you can do is compare him to the most recent Ohio State quarterback. He's got I think he's a better passer than Justin Fields. I mean, maybe that isn't a surprise given what people think about Justin Fields right now. Although Justin Fields at Ohio State was a good passer, lest we forget. Like, especially deep passer. He was exceptionally good. But I buy... Sorry, Ant.
No, I was about to say, Stroud can't run anywhere near as well as Fields. I think that's right.
No.
Stroud's a much better passer. Fields is a much better runner.
Yeah, I 100% agree. He can make all the throws. I think his resilience is underrated. He has been someone who people kind of love to hate all the way through because of the weapons that he has and because of the bad losses he's had in his career in big moments against Michigan especially. But, I mean, he ended up losing to Michigan, and then he put his best game of his career on his back when he should have beaten Georgia in the semi-final of the college playoff. Like, his performance deserved a victory. He was the best player on the field, and he was spectacularly good. He proved a lot of doubters wrong with that game. He's still got a way to go. And, you know, 2 losses to Michigan in the biggest regular season games back-to-back, when Ohio State haven't lost against Michigan before that in quite some time. You know, it's not ideal. But to then come back from that and put the best performance in it on the biggest stage that he's ever played on is someone, you know, that actually has some stones to him, and I appreciate that. I don't want to like him. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I have Michigan sympathies. But, you know, actually, I do think high floor guy, and actually, I think his ceiling is underrated. If he puts it together, when the O-line is worse, he gets puts under pressure more quickly with receivers that aren't as good in separation, and he can still do it. You know, he's got a reasonably high ceiling. He could be a really good quarterback. Like, I wouldn't trust people who are saying that the ceiling is lower than some of these guys. I think he just has a little bit more to prove because of what Ant has been saying. All right. Bryce Young, Alabama, presumptive at the moment, quarterback 2. Although there are murmurings still that Houston may be taking Will Anderson at the moment, so we'll see what happens there. But I know that, Ant, you're very high on Bryce Young. Maybe I hope I'm not speaking too out of turn for you, but what do you make of Bryce?
Oh yeah, he's quarterback 1 in this draft. He's been my quarterback 1 for a long time, and he's done nothing to disprove that. People just bitch about his height, which is the laziest argument in the world about him. I mean, it's as a passer, he's the best passer out of the lot of them. I mean, the way he gets touch on the ball, the way that he distributes it, and I mean, he's had nothing compared to what CJ Stroud has had to work with in terms of weapons there. Yes, he had Williams and he had Mechie the year before. He did have a few options there, but this year it's been kind of barren. There've been a lot of freshmen in there, a lot of young guys. He's had Cameron Latu at tight end, who he's done well with, but he's not had he's not had the elite wide receiver 1 weapons that CJ Stroud has had at Ohio State, and he has still had a damn good season, you know, and the losses that they sustained were not on him. The Tennessee game, that was because they couldn't defend anything that day, and Hendon Hooker had a complete, he just had the best performance of his career. But Bryce is tough. He is built tough. He is durable. I mean, people say the size. So when you say small size, there's 2 things you worry about. Well, a few things you worry about. Durability, not an issue. He's barely missed any time through injury whatsoever. He's taken a lot of sacks at Alabama. He has been beaten up. That Tennessee game is actually one of the best to go and watch because he got ragdolled and beaten up on that day, and he still led them to a win in that game. He kept dusting it off, getting up. I thought it was one of the best performances I've seen from him, and that really solidified him as quarterback 1, I thought. If he's that durable, he's that persistent, that stone, I mean, I can get behind that. And then, it's the passing. Are the passer's going to get battered down? Is the size going to impair his vision? No. He's never had accuracy issues. He's been really good with a much worse group of receivers around him. And it's never really changed. So he just happens to have come up against a legendary Georgia team in his time there. People say there's no natties. He's won a Heisman, so he's my quarterback one. He's got everything you want. The size doesn't matter. He's going to be an instant starter in the league, and the team is going to be much better off with him. And if a team's doing its due diligence and is selecting the best quarterback in this draft, he is that guy.
Ash?
Ditto. I pretty much echo everything Hans just said. He said it a lot better than I can.
So, with Bryce, there's 2 negatives I want to mention, and then I'll go into just backing up everything that Ant said. Deep ball passes down the middle of the field are not going to be a feature of his game. He throws great passes over the middle and the intermediate. He throws lovely balls to the outside, and he can throw it deep to the outside. But where you get a lot of mismatches down the seam versus safeties with bigger guys, tight ends, slot receivers, he can't throw that ball yet. Maybe he can in the future. He's clearly got the arm talent to do it. The height is the problem for that, and that's one of the problems that you find from his height. In terms of resilience, longevity, security, not missing time, he is elite, and is absolutely right. Like, he takes hits like an absolute champ. However, he had to run an absolute mile behind that Alabama offensive line, which was dire. And he had situations where he was prioritizing the success of his team, which is laudable, over his own safety. And while he didn't miss any time, sometimes you need to make a business decision to throw the ball away more quickly than he does. And I feel like going up against NFL quality defensive linemen and slot cornerbacks who are blitzing and stuff like that, if he gets hit like that by bigger, stronger, faster guys than he finds at college, I worry then about his longevity, because at college it definitely was not a problem. But I feel like he could make more business decisions and smart decisions to throw the ball away. That's not to say that he couldn't develop that, but he's just so desperate to win and to extend plays that he kind of almost goes too far doing that. And it's super impressive too. Like, you watch him, you can't help but jump out your seat because it's exciting. But like, if he was my quarterback, I'd be scared as hell at that sort of thing, at the same time as being excited that he was my guy too. Like, it's both of those things, and it's one of those things that doesn't project from college to pro very well, because the college edge rushers aren't built like the NFL edge rushers. They're just not. At least the majority of them aren't. Obviously, some of them go to the NFL and are that big, but they are the minority, and that's why the NFL is the elite of the elite. He's so exciting, though. He's, in terms of how you play right now, he's definitely quarterback one, for sure. Throwing over the middle of the field deep, you never saw Russell Wilson do that. But he was still one of the best quarterbacks in the league, still got the Seahawks to Super Bowls. Like, you definitely can have success with someone built like this.
I mean, the only pushback I would give on that is it's personnel as well. Mechie and Williams hit the perimeter a lot, and that's where speed guys hit the perimeter. That's where you get them. And tight end is not usually something that Bama really use that often in terms of the threat down the middle and the slot receiver. It's personnel. I don't know if it's he can't do it. I think it's a case of not in the scheme to do it. He's still got to prove he can, but I'd like to think with all the experience he's had tossing it to Mechie and Jamo and all that on the perimeter, that he could do it centrally as well. Depends on the system he's in. I
agree. There's definitely room for him to grow. And that is one of the more exciting things about him. He's already the best there, and he can still get better. So I 100% agree with you. Anthony Richardson. And if you will let me, because I can't let Ash go first, on this one, I have watched him extensively. I was going to do a tape review on him, but I just haven't had enough time to actually put it all together. He is, for all I've just said about Bryce Young being the current quarterback one, Richardson, when you take into account projection, he is my quarterback one in this class. And for me, when you take in current and future projection, it's not close for me that he's quarterback 1. Now, you may think it's based on athleticism, and of course, part of it has to be the most athletic quarterback the Combine has ever seen. But that isn't the most impressive thing about him. And actually, Ant is the one who mentioned this before I watched him. I'm pretty sure it was Ant. Despite the fact he might look surprised when I said his name. Something Ant said was, he's an elite rusher, he takes off well, and he's a threat with his legs. But he is a pass-first quarterback. He does not bail from the pocket prematurely, and he has good pocket awareness. These are the most projectable of NFL traits. You will be put under immense pressure in the NFL against elite defensive linemen. Your quarterback must not panic, but must not bail from clean pockets fearing pressure. And Anthony Richardson is the best in class at this. He may have only started 13 games. Just watch those games. Just watch a few of them. And everything I said about Will Levis, you can turn it on its head for Richardson. He feels quarterback play. The throws are bullets when they need to be. But when he needs to throw touch, they're some of the most catchable, pretty balls in the class. Like, the guy needs experience and needs reps. But he's put it on tape for me. Yeah, fine. There was one game where he had 33% completion rate. You know, that's not great. Some people have bad days. Florida O-line also gave him some time. Florida O-line was not particularly bad. Receiving core was bad, though. Receiving core was fucking horrific. Like, I question the Florida coaching. I really do. Because you just saw receivers running the wrong routes. I was talking about Tanner McKee. Was it Tanner McKee? No, it was Jaron Hall. Almost 3 hours ago now. And saying that, like, you couldn't tell sometimes whether it was the quarterback throwing the wrong ball or whether it was the receiver running the wrong route. It's abundantly clear that at Florida, the receivers hadn't a clue what route they were running. They were running into each other. They were running routes, the same routes as each other, next to each other, which was bunching up some of the DBs. And it's like, how are you expecting the quarterbacks to succeed in this system? And yet, when you have a look at Richardson versus Levis, Richardson wasn't putting his team in bad spots because of it. And Florida didn't have a huge amount of success. But Richardson wasn't the reason why they were losing. Richardson was one of the reasons why they were staying competitive. And this is just about Richardson as a passer. Let's add in the fact that he's probably the best rushing threat in the class. Like, 4.4 speed, just electric rusher. And he doesn't bail from pockets early. So when he does it, it's not like they can account for that as easily as some guys who are a bit more rush first. You know, contain ain't going to help because he'll beat you with his arm first and then he'll run. And that's why he's my quarterback 1. Because when he takes those starter reps and he needs to start day 1 to do it, he must start day 1. Because the rushing threat is going to provide the floor. And because he throws a catchable ball, and because he can throw the deep ball, he'll succeed. Now, he's not going to win the Super Bowl year 1. But I think he's the best prospect I've seen since I've started following the NFL at the college level. I know that sounds insane considering what prospects we've seen so far, but it's the combination of betting on traits with what I believe to be a high floor and the feel for quarterback play. His intangibles are insane. So don't get fooled by the people saying it's about his athleticism, because it's not. He is exceptionally gifted.
It heartens me when I know that you listen to the college pod and sometimes take in the things I say. So, you know, it's that's much appreciated. But you're right, he is, and I think I think when people start getting panned too much, then it's kind of almost a duty to go in and have a look and see for yourself and see if it is all warranted. And with Richardson, he has the stuff you need. And like I said, you know, the rushing quarterback type, he doesn't rush first. And that's the most critical thing for any guy. I said right at the beginning of the show when we're doing prospects, it's the same with Lindsay Scott. Doesn't rush until he knows he has to. Goes to his progressions, goes to his reads, the vision, the anticipate, all that, the mental stuff he's got. He scans the field. He's got the processing ability, goes through multiple reads, and it's just when it comes to that final little click together of actually telling his arm to throw the ball in the position he needs to, it's not there. And you know what? And you alluded to it. He's had 1 year as a starter. If you went through a lot of quarterback resumes coming out of college, going into the drafts, especially the 3-year guys are very interesting because a lot of the times you will see year 1, you'll see a 50% passing completed, somewhere in the 50s. Then you'll see it move up into the 60s, like 62, 63. Then you'll see it in year 3 move up to like 67, 68, moving up towards 70. The more snaps they get, the more reps they get, the more muscle memory, all this type of stuff, the accuracy naturally gets better over time. I see with a lot of quarterbacks that I do reviews for and that. He's a year 1 quarterback in terms of his starting reps who's got a year 1 completion percentage rating. And yes, some of the throws are bad, but he's not had the reps. And he's in this position now where he's going to go into the NFL, and the only way he's going to get reps is on an NFL field. So it's going to be baptism by fire, and it's not going to be pretty. But that's the only way he's going to get better. And if you are willing to live through that trial by fire, he's a guy who you might get as a quarterback and you're drafting, if you say 1 overall, you might be drafting 1 overall again next year if he's your starter all year, because you're going to go through growing pains and your offense ain't going to be perfect. If you ain't got defense to back it up, you could be picking high again. But you've seen it with Jackson. You've seen it with Trevor Lawrence at Jacksonville. They drafted a year top after they picked him. I'm not saying Trevor's in the same league, but sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to bed in, and it did with him. His case, he had all the talent he needed. He was just on a crap team. Whereas in Richardson's case, he's not got the talent just yet, but he will over time, and then his ceiling will be just as high as Trevor Lawrence's is. So, yeah, he's got everything you want again that you're looking for from a dual threat quarterback. Doesn't get the yips and just go running at the first sign of danger. He's very calm. He'll go through his reads. He's just got to get that final little connection, do the processing, decide what you're going to do, and execute properly. It's the execution. Once that execution gets even half good, he's going to be a legitimately dangerous quarterback in the NFL. And once that execution gets NFL level, God knows what could happen there. So that is the question. Are you willing to go through that trial by fire and put your reputation on the line for him? And for us, for me, it's always been a guilty, well, not a guilty pleasure, but it's always been we can afford it because we got 5 picks. And if we did it, I'm not going to complain, and I'll trust them to do it. And it works our system because I don't think I'd want him to see the field right away. Goff gets his year to get us to the playoffs and do his thing, and then you move on. But I agree. A lot of people just read into narratives and judge him. Don't. He's got what you need. He just needs reps. He's not had them. That's his issue at the minute.
Patch?
Listen to them. It's a stinky gate. I'm joking. I completely agree. And like any Florida State fans, if there's any out there, close your ears because I'm going to do us an incredible disservice and actually talk him up. Completely agree. He's a first-year starter with a first-year coach. This is Billy Napier's first year in Florida. He's been integrating a whole new system and everything. And yeah, it had growing pains. I know you referenced the 33% completion rate against Florida State. Opening that game, he was tearing us a new one. Kevin Knowles, God bless him, Florida State's version of Will Harris plays the slot role. He's okay. Nothing special. 2 coverage busts. What does Richardson do? Hits Ricky Purcell, who Ryan knows a lot about because he transferred from ASU to Florida State, I think, just like Johnny Wilson did. Long touchdowns. He was up early against us, and I was scared. You come back in the Discord, and you look. I was worried. I was really worried. This was it was going to turn to shootout, and I know Richardson is a better overall quarterback than Jordan Travis is. and it pained me. But then, the receivers started running the wrong routes. They were running too close together, and Adam
Didn't
Fuller,
he
our
get
defensive
hurt?
coordinator.
Didn't he get hurt as well?
Yeah, I think so.
He
Yeah,
took
he was.
time out from getting hurt.
Yeah,
which
he
no
and
one. Yeah.
he got sacked by God, no, Patrick Payton, the ACC Defensive Rookie of the Year, to close out the second half. Yeah, he was out for a bit. It's all this, and then we took over. But you go back and you watch that Utah. Was it Utah they played the first game of the season?
Think so.
I remember
Yeah.
I remember talking to Chris Buffett about him because I remember starting the season. I was like, I love Jordan Travis, but right now Tyler Van Dyke and Anthony Richardson are better NFL quarterbacks, and he did what he did against Utah. I know they lost, but he looked really good in that game, and that's what his upside is. He just needs the reps. And if he's there at 6, as much as it was paying me to as a Florida State fan, I'd run the card in myself.
I think Utah win that game. I felt like I bet on Utah in the pick watch and lost. Or was it the other way around? I must have bet on Florida.
I think it was the other way around because, but he's just he's got the athleticism of Cam Newton, but the throwing ability of, like, dare I say it, Aaron Rodgers. Like, he could have Aaron Rodgers' passing upside. He's just, as you say, he needs the reps, and he needs a coaching staff that can trust him because, as you say, there's going to be growing pains. You might have to put up with a few bad passes here and there. You just need someone to just keep his confidence there, and I think we could be that team.
I think your comp of those two players works very well in isolation. Actually, I really like it. I think 2 more things, just because I love him. The way the offense functioned reminded me of a quarterback who had been traded to the team and hadn't had an off-season working with the receivers. There wasn't chemistry there, and that's going to really hurt. You saw Goff when he started in Detroit. Even though he put in a full off-season, the chemistry still wasn't there to begin with. Like, it takes a little while. So, never mind learning the game and the muscle memory, but the chemistry wasn't there with the receivers, and that's a really big deal. The other thing is, I would say that Richardson's the only quarterback in the class who has the ceiling of best player in the league. I think he's the only person that could get there. Now, like, I'm not saying that's likely. Of course it's not likely. That's a shot in the dark. But he could be better than Burrow. He could be better than Mahomes. Like, he could be. Because the gifts are there. When you say he could have the rushing threat of Newton and the passing ability of Aaron Rodgers, the league's never seen that before. Like, Mahomes ain't on that planet. Because Mahomes, for all his ability as a rusher, because he's sneakily really, really good at running the ball, but no one fears him running you over. He's doing that in scramble drill and escaping for 20 yards when your linebacker's in man and vacates the centre of the field, which happened to us quite often against the Chiefs. But, you know, Richardson could do that whether there's a defender there or not. And that's the scariest thing about him. He's the only player I want to trade up for. He's the player at 6 that if Carter and him are on the board, I don't really care which one it is. He's the one that I'm going to shout the loudest for if we take him. He's the get up out of your seat player in the class. Final quarterback of note that we haven't mentioned is Hendon Hooker from Tennessee. One of the most glow-up players we've seen recently. That Tennessee side was exceptional. You know, he looked fantastic this season, and I know that you were a fan of his going through this year. What did you make of Hooker, and what do you think of him now?
I mean, as a player, I really liked him. That Tennessee side was very fun to watch, and when they sort of broke that glass ceiling against Alabama, it was like the first win against them in 18 years or something stupid like that. It had been a long time coming, and for them, that offense to really show up and break out, it was just indicative of how good he was that year, and I really like him as a quarterback. So it was great to see him come out and perform well. However, I want us to have nothing to do with him at this level. He is not a Detroit Lions quarterback. He is not what the Detroit Lions need. And I don't want to go anywhere near him. I mean, first of all, you have to look at the offense he runs. It's a spread offense that he plays in. It's verging on air raid. It doesn't exist in the NFL. You know, it's lots of speedy options downfield, just tossing it all the time, going. It's not how we play. And for him, it's going to be a big adjustment at the next level to play a pro-style offense, which he just did not do there. Then the appeal is the dual threat ability with him, which is fine. And you're coming off the ACL tear. I know it's a clean tear and he's going to be back and that, but you've still got to wonder how it affects him at the next level. Because you said with Bryce puts himself in harm's way when he's running and takes lots of big hits on that. Hendon Hooker does the same, and people seem to forget that. He is a guy who, and I think it's just natural with some of these guys, they're like, screw it, I'm the quarterback, I lead by example, I'm going to put myself in harm's way so that all my teammates will with me type thing. And whilst it's admirable, whilst he's coming off an injury like that, it's also a worry that he does it again and one more injury like that, and he could be in real trouble. And if you take that dual threat ability away from him and he can no longer be that type of guy, I just don't think he has the downright ability to be a great pocket passer at the next level. It's just not how he plays. It's just not what he's built around. And I don't want to run that risk, really. And then you've got the age. It's going to be another who's 25 this year. And I know I've said some of the guys who've been older I don't mind, but they're generally later in the draft. If you're drafting Hooker, you're going to start him sooner rather than later. This is Goff's year. Regardless of anything, this is Jared Goff's year for the Detroit Lions. He has earned this opportunity to get us to the playoffs. So you're going to be sitting him a year. So going to be 26 by the time you get in there. You know, is he still going to have picked up the scheme? Is there just too many unanswered questions in terms of how we play and what we look for? And it's not saying he's a bad player. He's not. I've really enjoyed watching him this year, but just in terms of fit for us, me and my limited online, you know, talking head knowledge, I just don't think he's right for us. So, great quarterback. I hope someone gives him a go. Again, I think it's going to be a year or two before we're talking, you know, starter who starts to make waves in the league. But put him in the right system. Put him in a team that likes to pass it a lot. And you will get a good quarterback out of him, but just not us.
Ash?
He is going to go in the late first, and it's not going to be us. I've read today at least a lot of stuff to do with him and the Saints, and I can see it because I know they've got Kamara, who's a really good running back, but he's more of a receiving back than he is a running back, in my opinion. And he could just. They're the kind of roster that he could come in and do well with because, as we all know, they're consistently just trying to win it, always pushing the can down the road. And he's the kind of quarterback that they can fall in love with, where he's good enough to be a starter and he'll be cheap on the rookie contract. And they can just plug him in for the 4 years after he's recovered from the ACL and get good quarterback play from him while they try and hopefully fix their cap prop. Well, hopefully inverse commas, because obviously we don't want them to, because we want to be the contenders in the NFC, not them. But he's cheap enough and good enough that they can make do with perhaps worse options on the outside and on the offensive line and all that while they fix themselves and then they can try again.
But are they going to pay all that money to Derek Carr to sit and be Hooker's backup?
That's what I've read that. Yeah, there's a lot of speculation linking him to them at 28. They play.
He'll
Carr,
sit then. He will sit.
Yeah,
they're not
he'll
signing
sit
Derek
for these.
Carr.
Yeah, it's nuts.
So sitting this year, definitely. It's like either next year or the year after.
I echo both your sentiments on him, really. The thing about him is, I know the offense doesn't exist, but that deep ball is so damn pretty. Like, his accuracy over 30 yards is insane. I've never seen anything like it. But an offense can't function that way. You'll get opportunities to throw that pass twice a game. And if he executes it, maybe you can build something off that. But, I mean, it's a boom or bust way to play NFL. Like, you're right. He puts himself in harm's way, and I'm worried that, he could find himself missing more time than not. He's a likeable guy, great rusher, a lot to prove, and he'll be a risk for anyone who takes him. Arm talent's clearly there, but I don't want to go anywhere close. I'm with Ant. All right. We have some questions that we had come through, but we've been going a long time, so I'm going to sign off now for our recorded listeners and then just get to a couple of questions before we go on the live. If you want some extra time, don't forget to go to our YouTube and Twitch channels and you can get some extra time with us. Our next episode is tomorrow for the College Podcast. The guys are going to be looking at Dynasty Fantasy rankings for the rookies coming into the NFL. Next episode after that is a special on Thursday evening with Nick Baumgartner of The Athletic, another beat writer coming in second consecutive week for us. Really looking forward to that. Nick's second time on the show, and he was great the first time round, so high hopes for that, finding out about what he thinks in this NFL draft, and obviously his podcast with Colton Pouncey one of these years is one of the best in class. So really looking forward to that. Don't forget to follow us on our socials, Rule of the Lions UK on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and the group on Facebook for worldwide fans. It's Detroit Lions fans UK, one pride worldwide. The articles are coming out on rotluk.com. Please don't forget to subscribe and rate us 5 stars on your podcast provider. My thanks to Ant and Ash and Ryan who left earlier. My name's Matthew Turner, and we'll see you next time on the Royal Lions UK podcast. But for now, let's go Lions, one pride.
One pride.
Book the Packers.
Recording stopped.
Do you guys have time to go through like 3 questions?
Yeah, I've got time. I'm going nowhere. What are we doing next week, by the way? Are we in mock draft season as of next week?
It is our first mock draft, Lions 7-round live mock draft.
Oh, it's the Lions one.
Lions.
Oh, yeah, of course it is.
Well, we normally do the Lions 7-round mock draft because it doesn't take very long and we can discuss the options at each pick position in general. And then
It's the 32 man.
the
31 team.
31 team full first round mock draft. So I don't know how we're going to do it, whether we all do individual ones and just tell everyone how it went. That's what we did for the full first round mock draft, and it was like a versus type thing, which I really liked. But for the 7-round Lions draft, I don't know what we did last time, so I'm gonna have to double check it.
Wasn't it like
we have it
similar?
where we have an Excel spreadsheet up, or one sheet, and then we blank it all out, and then we reveal it as we go along. All our things are hidden underneath.
That was cool. All right. Let's get to questions. Michael Lucchese, who's just got the best name, says, what quarterback at each draft pick that's somewhat possible would have each of you very excited? Maybe just pick a quarterback at a position we might draft someone that will excite you more than others. One each.
So, quarterbacks who would excite us undrafted.
Quarterbacks that would excite you at a draft position that we have. So not undrafted, just like you're higher on this guy than the consensus. So the idea you might get them at their projected spot is really exciting to you.
Last pick of the draft for us, Lindsey Scott Jr. I can't understate how excited I would be if we got him as a passer. So, yeah, last pick we've got, Lindsey Scott Jr.
Ash?
Jordan Travis with next year's first round pick.
I knew he was going to say that. I was going to say that as a joke.
Don't ruin it.
You could see my smoke. You could see you don't mind me smoking about that. Okay, being honest, Richardson was 6. Then Jordan next year.
He'd be QB8 in this draft, you know.
Really that high? Sorry.
He's better than Tanner McKee, but that's about it.
So with our final pick in the 6th round, I gotta go with the crowds because I've been on this train. The guys know it since the start of this season. Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I fell in love with UCLA this year. He's just so exciting. He's a boom or bust pick. He is going to be a reason you lose a game as well as win a game. But my God, the guy knows how to win. He's made of grit.
You're going to have to spend pick 81 on him.
No, don't believe it.
Well, believe in it.
He's a day 3 player. There's no way. There's no way he's a day 2 player.
Well, I would digress. There have been a lot of stupid quarterback decisions on day 2 in recent years.
Yeah, fair enough. Right, next question is from Dan Pask, who says, who is the smartest quarterback for you in day 3? I don't know what he means by that, as to whether he means intelligence or the smartest pick, the most shrewd pick. I think we've kind of picked most shrewd pick in most exciting, potentially. So maybe, who do you think has the most intelligence as a passer?
O'Connell, probably.
The guys we've discussed.
No,
in general, Haynes a good shout.
Jake's very high IQ, so I'd say Haynes in with a shout there.
Yeah, I don't have anything better to suggest. Final question is from Perry Ball, who just comes up with lots of good questions. But this one I think we might struggle to come up with more names than we have, because we've already come up with some names. He asks, are there any small school quarterbacks that can develop into a solid starter in the NFL? I will say to you first, trying to find solid NFL starters from small schools is like a needle in a haystack. You're trying to find developmental guys who have a 5% chance. But do you guys have anyone in mind?
I'm going to be brutally honest and say we've listed them all. You're not going to get a more in-depth small school podcast guy, like small school quarterback podcast this offseason. We've talked about Lindsey Scott. We've talked about Tim DeMorat. I've talked about Jalen Fowler, who's from the HBCUs. You cannot get more obscure than that. The only other guy that we've not really mentioned is Bajan. And, I mean, is Bajan going to be... I mean, Bajan's basically FCS or Division 2 Bailey Zappi from last year. So, for me, out of them all, it's still Lindsey Scott who's going to be the guy. Out of all of them, he's the guy he's going to be like the potential. I think he'd be a starter. I do. The rest of them, I think you're all in backup territory, in my opinion.
Yeah, fair enough. I was going to say Bajan because obviously we've seen him 3 times this year, supposedly, and then he was at the Senior Bowl and that, so he was going to be my answer.
I can't think of any more small school QBs who were in this year, to be perfectly honest. If we got 4,
yeah,
I don't think there's going to... There'll be guys in there, but most of them will just get picked up by the... I think it's in legitimate chances of getting drafted. Those are the 4. And even Fowler's probably not going to be, so there'll be 3 of them. Who's the... I'm just thinking.
James
does BJ Thompson comes from Stephen F. Austin. Do they have a quarterback? Stephen F. Austin might have a quarterback in the draft, but if they do, I don't know anything about him.
I'm on the consensus board right now, and it's depends. Like, how do you find small school? Would Charlotte be small school?
No, CUSA. Does it mean small school as in group of 5? I mean, is that's small school, or is it generally people by small school mean FCS or Division 2? I mean, Lindsey Scott, Jalen Fowler, and Tim DeMorat are not on most boards, so we've gone off board for these. So I don't think we can really go that much further. To be perfectly honest, and I don't think anyone's ripping up the XFL enough to be considered. I don't know. I've not really watched it, but I don't think anyone's going to make a miraculous reappearance from the XFL at quarterback and shock the league. Although Abraham Smith should come back at running back. He's fucking killing it.
So it's getting late now, so I'm going to take, 2 last questions, but I'm going to answer one myself because I don't think it needs much debate, which is, would you take Andrew Voorhees in the 3rd? I think the answer has to be, unfortunately, not, given his injury. He's a round 3 talent, but he's not going to develop like a round 3 talent because of that injury. He's not going to see the field in year 1, and he'll be a rookie in year 2 who needs development. So he'll get drafted, I think, but he'll be like a round 6 pick, and that's where he'll be. And if that's where we go.
I'd take him on day 3. I would absolutely take him on day 3. Bloody hell. Day 2, no, but
yeah. Big Aries says, well, since I got in late, because we've been going 3.5 hours, he says, well, since I got to join late, maybe I can throw a humdinger of a question at you, and this will be the last one. What players in the first round would you drive the Lions picking this year? Who are you standing for in round 1?
I'm not really standing for any of them. Oh Christ, who would I stand for in round 1? Bryce, I guess. I stand pretty hard for Bryce, but he's always been out of reach, so can I put guys in round 1 who I shouldn't, but I just stand anyhow?
Yeah.
Screw it. I'll spend a round 1 pick on Diane Henley. I'll stand for him, big time. I'd trade back up in the first for him, for absolute sure.
Ash?
All my guys are like day 2 and that. So I've got like, unless someone like really ran, I admit it will be a reach, but Jamie Robinson maybe. You know what? Cedric Tillman. Because he's getting some late first round buzz, and I do like him as an X.
You know what? I've stand Devon as well, so I don't know why I didn't say Devon, because I've been on that train a very long time. So yeah, Devon.
I fear annoying Ant too many times in one podcast.
What?
Go on, do it.
Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like
that's fine. That doesn't bother me. Why would it bother me?
Well, yeah, because I feel your concern on like him quitting on Ohio State late, and it worries me. But I see. So in the consensus boards, he's ranked no higher than 17th, and as low down as 26 by someone. And for me, he's clearly wide receiver 1 based on skills. He's clearly wide receiver 1 for me based on upside. I really think that Ohio State, because they're just so overpowered, actually end up not showing the best traits of their guys because it's just kind of easy for them. Because like, who are you gonna mark? Who are you gonna double? Like it's just. I think Jackson Smith and Jigba can be the X. Genuinely think he will succeed at the NFL level at the X position. You have a look at people who have his sort of speed, but have his sort of quickness, and you're looking at people like DeAndre Hopkins. And DeAndre Hopkins never took the top off a defense, but had enough speed to threaten people over the top, but he just didn't blow them away. He's the most technical route runner in the class. He makes people look stupid. He's what people want Zay Flowers to be. Apart from he's just bigger and more refined.
Speaking of, Zay Flowers is getting mocked to the Patriots at 14 now.
It's a joke. Absolute joke.
Bonafide Zay Flowers halfway through round 1. That would be... I don't think he's in my 31-man mock in 2 weeks, but that's where he is now. So.
You too can get traded to the Bears for a 7th round pick. Maybe
the
Patriots
are the new. The Patriots are the new Raiders now. You'll look to their picks for them the most funny.
I need to go because it's late and I have work. But Man Bear Pig asked one more question, and can we just keep this brief? Trade up or trade down from pick 6? Your thoughts?
Down.
Up for Will. I'm sorry, but
up for Richardson. Will love it. I would be okay with trading up for Will Anderson, even though I don't like it. And trade down. If we get a good package, I will trade down no matter who's on the board. If we get a good package. So, it depends how far. But if Tennessee come in for 11 and a 2024 first and maybe like a 4th as well this year, I'm all over it. And actually, I just think we can win now. I really think we can win now, but I also don't want to be tied to Goff. And so 2024 first is important to me, and I'd be willing to trade down a reasonable distance with a team that I thought would be bad next year to do it. So teams that overperformed last year maybe won their division that you're projecting regression from. I would trade down to get a 2024 first with the Minnesota Vikings. They didn't win the division, but I think they'll be picking in the top 5.
I love our inability to not give short answers.
Yeah, I said it myself and I can't do it. Right.
I know, exactly. Just complete inability to do it short.
I love football, and life is more boring. Anyway, we got to get out of here. It's 3 hours 40 minutes now. This is
D's just starting
record.
as well.
New record.
This is our longest show. That's not a draft show. Yeah, guys,
this is just us prepping for the draft.
Yeah,
I mean, we're going to be doing 7-8 hour streams, so we're getting there. We've got to build our way up.
3 weeks, 3 days to go. Over 20 hours of live streams. The most guests we've ever had. 29 and counting. It's gonna be mad. Join us for that. Ash and Ant, thanks for extra time. You are troopers. If you guys in the live chats have been here from the start, watching all the way through, you fucking legends. We love you guys. Thanks for sticking with us and the support. We'll see you tomorrow for the college show. Bye for now.
See you in a bit.
Bye-bye.